Okay, good morning. We're gonna start now. And please, everybody note that it's being recorded on the WebEx. Are we recording? Okay, cool. Is there anyone who wants to read the land acknowledgement? I do it if nobody's.
I don't know.
Oh, you don't have, oh,
minute.
it's right here if you wanted to read it.
The next. Oh,
Oh, it's up there too.
Either way,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry. San Francisco Department of Public Health staff acknowledges that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush Ohlone community and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples.
Thank you. Okay, so Diana, roll call.
So roll call will now be taken to establish quorum. When I call your name, please say here or present or somehow indicate that you are here. Member Fields.
Good.
Member Gonzalez. Here. Member Hammer.
Here.
Member Lipton.
Somehow I am here.
Member McGuigan is studying for the civil service exam and will not be here. Member Patterson has a family emergency and will also not be here. Member Salinas.
Here.
Member Short.
Here.
Member Wong.
Here.
So we have 7 out of 9 people present and have a quorum to continue, which the quorum is 7.
Do we need to excuse the absent members? I know
Yes.
they both had, okay.
We will need to vote to excuse the absent members. So, yeah, Member McGuigan and Member Patterson contacted us and let us know why they are not here. So I will,
Move to excuse.
okay,
Second.
Both.
okay. So now I will call and ask if you vote to excuse members Patterson and McGuigan. So yes means you vote to excuse them and no means that you do not vote to excuse them. So Member Fields,
Yes.
Member Gonzalez. Yes. Member Hammer.
Yes.
Member Lipton.
Yes.
Skipping McGuigan and Patterson. Member Salinas.
Yes.
Member Short.
Yes.
Member Wong.
Yes.
So we have 7 yeses and 0 nos. So a majority vote to excuse members Patterson and McGuigan. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, here's what we've got today. We're gonna receive updates on the system mapping and the community engagement. And then we're gonna learn about the DPH annual implementation report for our review. Receive updates as we usually do with Dr. Cummins about behavioral health service and mental health stuff. We're gonna elect the committee chair and vice chair. Woo, woo, woo. And then we're gonna do our planning for the next upcoming meetings. All right. I like it's a very concise agenda, although we know it will take all of the time.
Very long.
Yeah, we know it will take all the time. Okay, so next we got to do the approve the meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
Okay, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
We have to
Oh.
the public comment and then you get to vote.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so that's page 7 is the public comment and then voting is slide 8.
I gotcha.
That will happen anytime we need to vote, we need to do public comment first. So members of the public who wish to comment on the minutes from the December meeting. There is nobody here in person, so if you would like to comment and you're online, please raise your hand and we will unmute you and you will have 2 minutes to comment. I'm going to see. Refresh. I don't see anybody with their hand raised. Does anybody see a raised hand? Okay, then I suggest that we close public comment and go to the voting part.
So now, you want to make your motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
You have a
And we
second?
can't do the like all in favor thing. I think it's a rule that we have to do by name voting.
We have to do roll call?
That's
Oh.
my understanding, Valerie. Is that-
I think, it's a procedural, yeah, okay.
A second,
Yeah.
okay.
You want to run roll?
Sure,
Okay.
yeah, so now you, if you say yes, that means you're approving the December minutes. If you say no, you're not. Member Fields,
Yes.
Member Gonzalez, Member Hammer,
Yes.
Member Lipton,
Yes.
Member Salinas.
Yes.
Member Short.
Yes.
Member Wong.
Yes.
So we have 7 yeses and 0 nos, so the December meeting minutes are approved. Back to you, Chair.
That the interim chair is now 8 minutes ahead of schedule.
Setting it up so you, yeah. Sharing. Okay, so, I'll talk very. We're moving to, item 2, which is the mapping of community engagement. For that, I'm passing on to Ashley. Oh, I'm not passing it on to Ashley.
I'm wondering if we could talk a bit about chair and vice chair elections while we
Okay,
have a
Mhm.
So
couple of minutes,
let's-
if that's all right.
It is fine with me.
so that would be for people following along at home, slide, welcome down here. Slide 66. So Sarah, you
Oh,
pick off slide 66.
okay.
On yours, it might be 68, the number.
67.
It's around there. It's discussion item 5, and it's called IWG governance and membership.
One that says path to Valerie.
Yes, that
Um,
one, that one.
Oh, what is Valerie saying? So we didn't receive the slides we had previously on this before, but I'll save the membership update specifically for Dr. Cummins, but we have a lovely moving graphic to thank interim chair Short for work.
And we had an interim chair.
Interim. So, so I want to review the requirements about chair and vice chair. So, we are technically supposed to have one, however, we can continue to operate without one. If nobody else steps up, it would be just that we would need to continue to run these meetings with somebody volunteering every time to serve as chair. And in between, we would not have an identified person to help settle between agenda item choices or necessarily speak on behalf of the group if there's interaction needed with elected officials, with the public. So it is very helpful to have somebody in that role, and Member Short has been very helpful in that role as well. We do our best to make it not too burdensome for folks. But we will continue to put this on the agenda every month until we can fill those spots. And so I am revisiting that topic again now. Technically, any chair, vice chairs end at the end of the year. So Member Short is stepping in today, actually, just as a temporary interim. Yeah. So I'm wondering if we have any interest on somebody else serving as chair or vice chair.
Yeah, interesting.
I will just say that it's really just that my job situation is so uncertain right now. I just don't want to commit and then have a job where I can't get the 4 hours to be here consistently. So that's my big concern. Otherwise, probably for vice chair, I would stick it out. Maybe not for chair, but I am willing to keep doing it as I can in the meantime. But I think it's better we get someone more permanent. And as soon as I have more certainty, I will, if I can, I'll do more of a full commitment.
So it sounds like you're willing to be vice chair. Am I hearing that right?
Yes, but it's not, I just don't know how long.
Right. I mean, I don't think.
So it's a very for now thing.
We're not gonna like put a
Sure,
stone.
But sure,
Come to your house and,
And I will say that the,
I've seen your ways.
we bring cupcakes.
so the regulations that apply to this body and also the bylaws are very flexible with this type of thing for advisory bodies. So for Member Short or any others who are interested, this is something that like you can step back from
Mhm.
at any point. Yeah, Ashley, hi.
And to be clear, the cupcakes do help.
Okay. That's good. They are from the cafe, the very amazing cafe next door.
I'm just waiting for it to be closer to,
Very reasonably priced.
don't say I ate a cupcake for breakfast.
So,
I'll volunteer the chair.
thank you, Member.
I'm not
You are a chair.
You get 2 cupcakes.
No, that's.
So I think we have to then do official voting, right?
And we have to do public comment.
Okay.
Well, does somebody have to move
I
something?
believe so.
So somebody would need to move the.
I know.
You.
I nominate, together?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Why don't you assume?
I don't think you
Nominate
have to.
Andrea Salinas for a new chair and Sarah Short for a new vice chair.
Second,
But then we.
I think
Okay.
the idea is that public comment theoretically could influence your vote.
Got it. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, look, now she's choking. She's.
There's three
Whoops, I can't
attendees.
do it.
So members of the public who wish to provide public comment for this agenda item, which is voting on the chair and the vice chair, are invited to participate in 3 ways. There is nobody here in person. So if you are joining online and would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. If you are calling in, please press pound and then pound again, and then *3, and that will raise your hand and we will unmute you. Everybody would have 2 minutes to speak. I'm going to refresh the people are joining us online.
I can next with you.
I do not see any raised hands. Does anybody see any raised hands?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So I think we can close public comment and move to the voting.
Okay, so it's the roll call again,
Yes,
right? And you want to run it?
sure. So we're now going to ask you to say yes or no. Yes means that you are voting yes for Member Salinas to be chair and Member Short to be vice chair. No means you don't. So Member Fields,
yes.
Member Gonzalez,
Yes.
Member Hammer,
Yes.
Member Lipton.
Well, it took a full gestation period to have a chair and a. So the answer is yes.
Member Salinas,
Yes.
Member Short,
Yes.
Member Wong. Woo, so we have
Yay.
everybody to elect you two as our chair and co-chair for 2024.
Sorry.
Yay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now, we're ready for the
Now we
mapping.
could go, yeah, so now we could go back to the mapping.
IRL,
which
Valerie.
is slide number 9, for those that are following on. following it.
Yeah, in real life, I like
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so should we? go
Yes.
to the next slide here?
Yeah,
And people joining us online, let us know if at any time you cannot hear us well.
all right. So as you recall, oh, when was the last time I was here? November, October? September.
Isn't the other group, I was at the other.
No, it was here.
Or was that? I don't-
Yeah, it was when she wasn't here.
Oh, October.
October, okay. So the last time I was here in October, Hillary shared the system of care presentation that she did for the board. And in that presentation, we included, I think, 1 scenario. And she went through that and then We went and edited and changed some of that presentation based on some of the feedback that we got here, and what she ended up presenting was a little bit different, a little bit more intricate. And she ended up only presenting one of three kind of flows that we had put together. And so today I'm circling back around to present the rest of the flows that we had actually put together for that presentation, and to align with like the IWG requests that had come through, and multiple other requests that we've had for mapping and flows. And then I can answer any questions that we have. We can talk through any recommendations that the group might have, and then we can talk through what next steps look like as well. And hopefully, we can kind of wrap this up so we can push forward with the community engagement piece.
I think,
Right? Yeah.
sorry, that you were saying something.
Oh, next slide, please. So the first scenario, this is the one that actually Hillary presented at the Board of Supervisors presentation in October on the system of care. So this first slide just gives you a high-level overview of the client, a male 57-year-old diagnosed with bipolar disorder, uses methamphetamine, is currently engaged in treatment, is experiencing homelessness or has been marginally housed for the last 15 years, has been engaged in mental health treatment, but only for short periods of time, has a history of ED visits, has cancer, but is not regularly receiving physical health care. I actually forgot to mention that these aren't exactly client stories just for client confidentiality reasons. These are more like composites. And the team did put these together. And by the team, I mean RAOA team, Heather's team at OCC. We used our case managers to put these together. So next slide, please.
Valerie, next slide.
That's a.
Oh,
There's a lot. Thank you.
We're all
You're not-
hotspot, so it's a little bit delayed because of the internet.
okay, I won't jump on you.
That's okay. It reminds me to take a break and pause for a minute. So in this particular scenario, we are going to go over the crisis piece. So SCRT, the Street Crisis Response Team, encounters Gerald after he's observed in distress on the street. They assess and transport him to DOOR and make a referral to the Office of Coordinated Care for follow-up. Upon receiving the referral, an OCC case manager meets with them at DOOR. The case manager reviews his health history to better understand his behavioral health needs, and learns that he's stopped using his medication because it didn't make him feel well. Gerald informs the case manager that a close family member recently passed away, which is contributing to his distress. He declines behavioral health care at this time, but agrees to receive help to find a navigation bed. Next slide, please. And at the bottom there, you can kind of see a visualization of the pathway that this person is going through and what services they're accessing. After visiting the navigation center with Gerald, the case manager offers to meet with him daily. He agrees to meet twice a week, but continues to decline mental health care. He finally agrees to develop a plan with the case manager and expresses that secure housing is his first priority, and that he's interested in receiving physical health care. He declines mental health care again and says he's not ready to make changes in his drug use, which he says make him feel better. He does agree to continue to discuss mental health and substance use care as a part of his care plan, and the case manager accompanies Gerald to coordinate entry access points so he can be assessed for permanent supportive housing. And then the case manager also works with him to re-engage him with his physical health providers, because as we mentioned before, he has a diagnosis of cancer as well. So over the course of 7 months, the case manager engages with Gerald. Progress is slowed when he disappears for a few days or doesn't want to engage with the case manager. The case manager remains persistent, tries to regularly engage and support Gerald, and tries to obtain supportive housing and and cancer treatment when he expresses interest. He's successfully placed in permanent supportive housing and begins treatment for cancer. Once he's housed, Gerald informs the case manager that he would like to enter mental health treatment. So the case manager connects Gerald to an intensive outpatient program, which we know as ICM, but we're calling it intensive outpatient externally. And a multidisciplinary team reviews his care plan, communicates with OCC, and implements the plan. An ICM case manager takes over and begins to work with Gerald at least twice a week. Next slide, please. Andrea, sorry.
I'm sorry, I have, but I think.
Do we want to
It's
wait?
just about the PSH.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I think,
no, we should go. It's just that, we're just having, I was having people who've been prioritized for 3 and 4 years and still not getting PSH housing. And so I just wish, I think that those things are really critical because that demonstrates you're useful to somebody, which then is like the hook for getting them to then. So I wish that it seems like I'm wondering what's this timeline? How long? I'm like, I feel like sometimes that's just us. We're like, are some people getting priority and ours not? How is this working? How is it that some folks can get housed, in less than a year, and where like we're literally struggling with someone who's conserved on top of it all, and it's been prioritized as far as we know since like 2020, and still we can't get any housing.
yeah.
So I just.
So is your question with this scenario whether OCC can move people to the?
Is that what's happening? If you're with OCC, do you move to the front of the line?
I don't think so.
No, there's a
Wait,
wait.
coordinator,
Yeah.
And then that's all, done based on the assessment, and
Yeah,
that's federal, and, so anyway.
I think it's just an idealized.
It's an.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
more
okay.
like, yeah.
It's an idealized
that's the-
scenario.
And we tried to wrap
Yeah.
kind of timelines around it to also give the board like some kind of sense of, well, maybe not a great sense of the timeline, but some kind of sense of time. And also just, coordinated entry is not DHS, right, as well.
Oh, yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. Yeah, like we don't have, yeah.
So I can
Things-
clarify it a little bit. What we can do is we only control, so BHS only controls placement into some supportive housing sites that are in our portfolio that we have like utilization management review over. But other sites that we fund, that we like work order to HSH are all under coordinated entry. So I think, I know housing has been elevated as an IWG like topic of interest for this year. And I think we do want to get HSH here to talk, and they're undergoing like strategic planning and redesign of coordinated entry. So I think these are the kinds of things that IWG, I would suggest, should help elevate to them when
Yes.
they're here. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't remember how many BHS beds, 5,
Can you speak a little louder? Sorry.
the HSH BHS beds, like 5.
We only have direct control of about 300.
300,
Yeah.
that's right.
Majority are still operating through HSH, including placement. Yeah.
Which sites do you guys have? Is it particular
We-
sites or beds
I mean,
scattered?
it's like a portions of beds in different contracts.
The behavioral health bed, yeah.
Because I think also there's like such disparities around the length of, the quality of the PSH sites and the length of time it takes to, even when it's for certain housing agencies to fill their vacancies, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
What I can do is
So-
also like keep that question like on my list for like if we're reaching out to HSH to have them come, like the kinds of things we'd like them to help speak to, if that's.
Mhm.
I think that's the kind of things DPH wants them to speak to as well, so.
Yeah,
And I think particularly with the complicated medical comorbidity, right? So that like in the past when when we had folks with the elevated, medical, they would get a bump to the top, right? Which was very critical, like because it meant for seniors, they would get a bump, and folks like, like this guy with cancer, which, and that's like, if this guy had only been homeless for 2 years, he would never get housed. He would die on the street of cancer, right? And in the current system,
Yeah.
right? So those kind of
And there
things.
are
just-
pros and cons to having created HSH not too long ago. But one thing that did happen was essentially all the housing components of DPH got pulled out
Mhm.
and,
Mhm.
placed under this new department.
Yeah.
And so that's something we can be observing and commenting on and asking questions about, because what it did was, sort of take any of that purview away from DPH to be able to do placements in their own housing portfolio or to acquire new buildings or, any of that.
I don't know, somehow it's not nearly worked as well and efficiently under HSH as it did under DPH.
That's an interesting observation. But I would
At least
say,
for us.
I mean, this is a longer conversation, obviously,
Yeah.
but I would say a
Yeah.
big reason behind that may not be necessarily, because HSH doesn't do it well or blah, blah, or, the bureaucracy there is, more bureaucratic than but it may be everything to do with coordinated entry. And that's why, because there's just so many critiques of that, and that's why HSH is in the process of reforming coordinated entry, but we, the jury's still out on what that's going to look like and then what the actual implementation will, hold for us. So yes, let's, now that we're a team here, we can keep this on the radar and get HSH here next, well,
Yeah,
soon.
and the quality of services in the buildings has gone down tremendously. But not so much that I'm confused now if there are any more because when they were DPH and then they went to HSH, but now there's a lot of contracting out. And those folks
for services, you mean?
for services, they're not helpful. There's no accountability, it seems. I don't know if any of the I'm sure there's some buildings that still have HSH on-site service, or are they all contracted out now? I
Well,
don't
many
know.
of them have, do you mean in the HSH buildings? 'Cause
Yes.
Many of them have in-house services. So the housing provider has
It's like
their own
EA
resident services.
Yeah,
department.
ECS and
Yeah,
TNDC.
most of them
all
have
these
their
folks,
own
they're not,
resident services departments.
they're not responsive at
Speaking
all.
in the supportive housing
Yeah.
seat here, yeah, most of them, but part of the issue from, I would say, is also that they tend to be case managers and such and counselors and not higher level clinical.
So they won't
services.
even do that though. They won't even they won't even help us
That's
let
a
an
different
IHSS
issue,
worker
yeah.
in the building,
Yeah.
We didn't have those problems before when they were DPH and then went to HSH, when they were city workers.
Yeah.
We didn't have those problems that we have now with some contractors.
Yeah, very few of them would have any city staff in there now.
Yeah.
Not HSH does not provide direct service staff.
So
Anyway,
it sounds like there is
have-
perhaps yes, and I think some of this.
sorry,
and-
we're getting sidetracked.
No, it's okay. It's
But,
about
yeah.
our jurisdiction, though, gets a little muddy, but it sounds like in terms of the map itself, like the flow, more information might be useful, sort of like the pathways into housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is a common question
Mhm.
that gets raised about
Right.
our collaboration with HSH. and
Yeah.
Documenting what that process.
Yeah.
Because there's the whole aspects once they get into housing and maintaining
Mhm.
the housing. And so that's,
Yeah.
The habitability issue, like, especially for someone like who is sick, like there's a lot of things to navigate also with them. And if you don't have any collaboration with the on-site staff, it makes it very difficult. Yeah.
So not just entry into housing, but like.
Continued.
maintenance.
So,
Yeah.
exactly.
Anyway.
Sorry.
Continuing. No, it's okay. And feel free to
Sorry.
stop me along the way and kind of interject. I think it might be easier.
Here to-
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying.
Yeah. I think it's like, we don't have to hold the questions until then. So,
Okay, good.
all right. So scenario 2, this is one that actually Hillary did not review at all. And we kind of held on to these. But Joanna is 37, we're the same age, has a bipolar diagnosis, uses methamphetamine and fentanyl, is currently unengaged in treatment, has been unsheltered for many, many years, and has encountered the joint field operations and has been referred to Best Neighborhood. Joanna is staying in an encampment. She is highly disorganized and has a lot of belongings. She has a disorganized thought process with manic features. She's encountered by the healthy or HLOC. The HLOC team refers Joanna to the Best Neighborhoods Behavioral Health Care Team, which is a part of the Office of Coordinated Care. Next slide, please. When the Best team finds Joanna, she expresses that she's not interested in shelter, substance use, mental health, or medical services, although she agrees to have the team come back and meet with her again. And so the team follows up with her at least 3 times a week to get to know her and to start to build rapport. After several weeks, Joanna opens up to the team about her mental health challenges. The team offers and she agrees to visit with a street-based psychiatrist. The psychiatrist assesses Joanna's mental health, recommends some psychiatric medication. She is open to the medications, but is also concerned about living on the street and taking medications that can make her less alert and compromise her safety. So the team revisits the idea of helping her find shelter, which she agrees to, and the team helps her move into shelter placement. And again, that goes back to your question, Andrea, about how quickly that works and how it works, right? And then
The NAV centers, I mean, getting into the NAV centers tends to be much quick, fairly,
then coordinated,
fairly,
sorry.
it's much easier, yeah.
The psychiatrist with the daily support of the OCC registered nurse starts Joanna on her medication, provides medication support. Joanna continues to decline treatment for substance use disorder, and the team continues to work on building motivation to make changes in her substance use. Best Neighborhoods also begins working to obtain permanent supportive housing for Joanna, and Joanna becomes more stable in her shelter and on medications. Best then transitions her care to an ICM program. ICM takes over her care plan and mental health treatment and supports Joanna with her permanent supportive housing move. And Joanna is now adherent with her medications and reduced her distressing street behaviors. And that's the wrap up kind of on Joanna. And as you see, these kind of have like a similar thread or theme where a lot of it's like ICM, someone that's, experiencing homelessness, has had trouble being housed, and refusing kind of treatment. These are the scenarios that were also requested by the board. So there were some specificities that came through them as well. But
doesn't say, maybe I missed it. Does it say that she is still taking Phenylan and methamphetamine, or is that something of the past in this scenario?
yeah, they treat her mental health problem. They didn't go into whether or not she continues to use. At some point, she doesn't want to stop using. So they treat the mental health challenge that she's having. They didn't continue to say whether or not they did.
Most likely they're
Yeah.
not gonna stop you, but we can still treat.
No, I was
her.
just curious because it wasn't, because it was mentioned in the summary at the beginning, and I'm just.
Mhm.
With most folks like this, we give long-acting injectables, so she's probably, she's probably taking her long-acting injectable. I don't expect that she'd be taking an oral med, but yeah. Lots of folks agree to mental health treatment
Yeah, and I think
and
that
are
was,
using.
that was a common thread in some of these scenarios, is that piece was taken care of, but the other was.
And folks like the long-acting injectables a lot because it helps decrease the psychosis related to the meth use, so you can, not have as much of the bad parts of stimulant use. Or they're not as intense, right? So you can, so So they're like, they'll come in and be like, I need my shot.
I was
They're-
asking the question more because, I mean, mental health SF is focused more on the dual dual diagnosis, and this seems to address a half but not the other half. But I know there are challenges too, and so that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, and I think it's because it's like, what is that person open to at that given time too, right?
And folks that go into the NAV centers tend to get into PSH quicker. I think it's just for our clients that won't stay in the NAV centers and you never get them housed. And that's an issue. But it's good when someone is willing to go to a NAV center and stay there.
I'm gonna go through the next one. I think the next one's pretty short. And these don't have as much like color and like detail as you see the first one did, because we did focus on just one and trying to build that one out a little bit more than maybe these did. And then Ronald, 63 years old, uses alcohol, currently not in treatment, and has also been unsheltered for many years. Next slide, please. He uses alcohol in public, screams and yells at neighbors, and panhandles in public places. He is encountered by SCRT because of a neighbor who called 911. SCRT makes a referral to the Office of Coordinated Care for follow-up, and the Best Neighborhoods Behavioral Health Team locates and engages with Ronald on the street. Next slide, please. Best locates Ronald and begins to engage with him. He is initially uninterested in services, but does agree to follow up. The team visits him 3 to 4 times a week. He says he's interested in finding housing. The team coordinates with the SF Hot team to provide a housing assessment for permanent supportive housing, and works with him to find shelter in the meantime. He is hesitant about going into shelter due to some of the rules, but also expresses interest in reducing his alcohol use. The team suggests the managed alcohol program is an option, and he agrees to try it out. With help of the Best team, Ronald is admitted into the MAP program, or MAP, and preparation for permanent supportive housing placement continues in the background. He stabilizes significantly in MAP and no longer is exhibiting the distressing street behaviors. He reduces alcohol consumption, engages with the case manager, who starts to visit him less frequently because he has stabilized significantly. He's able to move into permanent supportive housing with a few services, including IHSS, on-site nursing, and case management. His care plan is taken over by the on-site case manager, but the Office of Coordinated Care is available to step in if there are any worsening symptoms. Next slide, please. I think that might be the last one, actually. Yeah. We can kind of pause there and see if there's any feedback on that previous scenario, maybe before we move on.
I just have a question. I'm not trying to be facetious, but how exactly is this mapping?
So these are flows of, or examples of how a client may flow through the system.
Right, but it's not, is the idea to sort of illustrate in these scenarios, which sort of programs and systems they engage with, and what ways that they assist,
Yes.
and that it's sort of a way to map through by example or something like that, like,
Yeah.
if that makes sense what I'm.
Yeah, it's kind of showing like the trajectory that a given client may take through the system and the services that they interact with, and the touch points of those services, whether that's through like BHS or maybe HSH. Like obviously there are other interacting kind of factors.
When I think mapping, I think, there's this program and this program, like almost a census or survey, and also maybe, or a Venn diagram, or, those
Sarah?
kinds. Yeah,
Sarah, if we've been talking, like, yeah, you're right. There's a number of different mapping conversations we've had for over the course of our time together. And if you remember, we've been talking about mapping as where providers are. We've talked
Mhm.
about like mapping
Mhm.
provider, like community need to providers. We've been, there's a number of ways that we've talked about mapping. And I can go find it, but there's a diagram that we've shared in the past that has like maybe 5 or 6 different kinds of mappings that we've talked about. So a year ago, when we started talking about this, we drilled in on kind of what the current state is, or kind of the ideal state is, and that's what Ashley's talking about, is like what is happening, what they hope will happen out there. And then Interethnica is taking that to talk a little bit about, like, flesh that out and find out what's people experience actually is with this and bring that back. And that mapping will show kind of the gap between the ideal state, or what's happening, and what is happening on the ground, to identify those challenges or those opportunities for improvement. But that's just one kind of mapping. So Sarah, you're right. There's a lot of other mapping that needs to be done. And some of that is already underway. Ashley can probably speak to like the provider work. They're working on updating the provider directory. And, Member Wong, I know that's something you've been really have cared a lot about, and so there are other things that are underway, but we're talking about one kind of mapping right now.
Okay, so I think this is very helpful. I'm not knocking, these scenarios. I think they illustrate a lot and bring it home to people who aren't in the midst of all this. However, I know we requested, mapping, and I think our idea was different in terms of more of the stuff you're talking about, Jennifer, but particularly really sort of a gaps analysis, right? Like what exists and what doesn't exist, what is needed, all of that. And it sounds like that has also been done, at least to some extent. And so what I would just suggest is that there be more of somehow a link made, between these scenarios and some of that other mapping that's been done to sort of show,
Yeah, I was just
when we're
gonna say-
talking about this, look, there's only, X number of providers who do this service, as we found, for, this particular component that helped in this individual client's case, like
Mhm.
that kind of stuff to kind of
I-
do this a little more.
I mean, I think part of why we're bringing this back today is to sort of talk about like what else is needed to
Yeah.
make this like a useful advisory tool for the IWG. And so what I'm hearing you say is perhaps, we would get, and we can talk about community engagement in a second, that helps refine this, but maybe the final product is some kind of a package that sort of pulls some of these other pieces together
That would help.
for different hearings, other things Ashley has done.
We have like,
We're doing
But even a
visualization,
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, so.
But
and I
even a
remember-
literal like link on the,
Yeah.
that connects to, like, when it says best program, then it links to where the best program
see.
is sort of
Yep.
on a different one of these maps, or that kind. There's a number of things like that that I think would help.
Kind of like the flow, where is it from one point to another, and how are they connected with the current, I think the directory that I have been asking for. So the existing program, how do they move through that system? How do we then connect all the services that can possibly support this individual?
Yeah, but yes. And I also think it's just incredibly important to know, sort of to Andrea's point, like, if it's like, oh, look how well that particular, service worked for this person, this individual. But let's look at how available that is, and how much of that do we have as a resource? And so maybe that helps us then determine, okay, we want to focus more on that and get some more, whatever it is, funding staff for that particular program. Like, it helps us think about all these things. So, I know there are a lot of other hands up. Yes. So,
No, and I noticed that Steve Field.
And
Yeah.
Hammer as well.
yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Does
Does that mean you noticed Steve Fields, so you called on him, or
Yeah.
have I just been noticed? Sorry, I
Go
was,
for it. Go for it, Steve.
I was out buying my own cupcakes, so I didn't feel totally left out. Yeah, I'm curious. One of the problems, we struggle a lot with what we think we mean by mapping. And if you overlay it on the original intent of mental health SF was about moving toward the system we need, not necessarily the system we have. Clearly, the mapping is a part of the steps in learning that. But I'm curious about how the department is seeing the effect of care court on these kinds of scenarios. It's going to change a lot of this. They run the risk of being antiquated scenarios in a system that's trying to change. And, these represent successful interventions, which I think is really positive in a way. But a couple of the individuals in these scenarios, you could argue because of their resistance to going into any kind of treatment when initially contacted or consistently contacted, could have made them candidates for care court. How is the department looking at the impact of something as transformative, potentially, not necessarily positively, of care court on the scenarios that we're looking at? Because otherwise we're talking about history. We're not talking about current interventions. And maybe we need to look at some of the scenarios of people who don't engage. So that's where we find out where we need services or where we're going to need to intervene in a way where care court doesn't become a big part of our compulsory treatment model that by most people's recommendations is doomed to potential failure if we don't handle it right.
And just while we're transitioning, Jen found the map of the mapping that we've talked about and can share her screen to remind us kind of how we got to where we are now.
I just wanted, Member Fields, I just wanted to acknowledge your comment and just, I think I'm making note of it for.
I think Dr. Gonzalez had something
Yeah.
to say.
Just to say yes, absolutely, Member Fields. We are working with BEST, with SCIRT, with everybody. We get referrals for people who might meet criteria for care court, just to say that none of these scenarios would have met criteria for care court because you have to have a schizophrenia spectrum disorder. But yes, definitely, that's part of the equation, and we are working with the different teams to get people connected to that if it's appropriate.
And I just want to say that, like, in terms of final products, I think it's a fair point that we don't have any scenarios currently where somebody does not engage.
No, and these were done like
you know,
way
Yeah.
before like care court was like we presented these in October to the board. Like these were over the course of the year before prior to that. So yeah, I mean, it is a good thing to know.
Yeah. So that's helpful feedback. Thank you. And Member Hammer, you.
I just want to make sure that I'm responding to past questions too. Can you see the map that I have on there? The lots of mapping going on? Okay.
Yes, you also see a pop-up that says file now.
It says what?
All done, you can close this file now. Says we tried opening this file on your computer. Try again. She's not seeing it? You're not seeing that?
I can, I don't
Maybe it's on yours, on yours.
Maybe it's
here.
on this end.
Is it, maybe, oh wait, it's us.
Oh.
Okay.
Nope, it's not us.
Maybe we can share
The robot.
Okay.
it.
I will get,
They're everywhere.
I will get a file of this over to Diana so she can share it, but just so and she'll put it up in a
We don't
little
have
bit.
Wi-Fi, Jen, so you can't.
Let's worry about the technical
Okay, yeah.
problems.
Okay, so
On their phone hotspot.
so the little box that does not help. Let me try a different sharing. Hold on
I mean,
a
but
second.
I think the relevant thing is that we had talked about optimal client flow and then there's actual client flow,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so this is the actual, so what, Ashley has prepared, right? Sorry, to call you Valerie, that's not, sorry, sorry.
It happens often.
And happen again.
So, that this is actual client flow and that then this is like a jumping off point to then expanding to actual client flow. Sorry if I'm interrupting you, Dr. Henry.
No, I think, I mean, this question of mapping, I think has always been, whenever any of us has said a real mapping of how patients flow through the different systems of care would be really helpful for us to understand in order to advise on how mental health SF can be implemented and can help bridge the gaps. I think whenever we refer to mapping, we each have a little different view of what we're talking about in our minds. And I think that the hard thing is that people have mentioned is that, you know, we've, as Jen said, like we've seen a bunch of different iterations of what might be called mapping of patient flow. That Ashley just presented, I think takes a patient and like shows an idealized way a patient could move through a complex system. But as we all know who take care of patients with mental health issues and substance use issues, you know, it's different for every single patient. So it's not like, how do I get from here to Los Angeles? Well, there are probably a few different ways. But how do I get this patient I'm looking at who has new onset schizophrenia to a place of wellness? I mean, there's so many variables and so many ways that that patient could flow through the system. And I just think it's impossible to show in a slide or a set of slides. It's really that we're building, I think, a three-dimensional picture of a care system, which, you know, part of, I think, what we're mandated to do with Mental Health San Francisco and the investments that people in San Francisco are making is to make it as seamless as possible, to identify the gaps that there are and make sure that the patients themselves don't have to navigate this complex system, and that anybody who's willing to engage, who wants to engage, can move from one place to another. And those who don't want to, there are options for them as well. But it's so complex that it's not just a map from, you know, how to get from here to there. It's like you have an individual, you know, and things like insurance and age and level of disability and impairment, like all those things matter, comorbidities, and it's impossible to like put a two-dimensional map together. So, you know, so I think this, these patient scenarios, I think, are just like a layer on top of, you know, what we're building in terms of mapping. But we're never going to see it on a two-dimensional, you know, sort of one slide or one set of slides, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's so
Well,
complex, hard to.
And can I add that I like one of the reasons that we share this is just to say, like, it is a three-dimensional. It's looking at it through different vantage points. So each one of these circles is a different way to look at the system, and we're looking at one thing right now, or one kind of mapping. And something we're gonna be talking about later today and ongoing is the Office of Coordinated Care, which is the actual client flow across the system. So they're
Right.
going with the care coordination and the things that they're doing. They are constantly doing these mapping of how people are moving through the system, and will be able to bring that information back. So I think it's to recognize and to honor all of this complexity that you're saying, and that's all totally true. And today it's kind of thinking about that one part of the mapping and getting the community engagement going with that, and then turning over to Office of Coordinated Care and talk and see what it looks like through that perspective.
I think I appreciate this as a jumping off point, and I think that, you know, we might just really look at, you know, especially if, like, say, I mean, and this would be the next steps, right? Especially for somebody like Ronald, who's, I guess I would say, is probably a chronic inebriate, and so that there's like this, there's a whole lot more to a person like that than is here. And so like that he might be a good example of someone to then take and for us to dissect, because he's probably had, you know, 300 ED visits, you know, over the last, you know, however long he's been on the street as a chronic, or actually probably 300 is actually a low estimate, right? If someone's been a chronic inebriate on the street for 15 years, right? Those folks tend to sometimes be in almost daily, right? They've had, I can think of someone who was on our team who was about his age and literally was there almost every day, right? So, and so that you would then add also that there's generally some traumatic brain injuries, right? And, you know, many traumatic brain injuries for somebody like that, right? And a lot of other complicated medical comorbidity. And that the other possible scenario is that this person never ends up, you know, in managed alcohol, but they end up at, you know, a sniff, right? And so, and what's the, you know, so, you know, they're, you know, I think that those are the other things that I think the things that are most complicated, the scenarios that are most complicated for us is anybody with a TBI, So like the chronic inebriates with a TBI, or a young person with schizophrenia and a TBI. Or the young folks with pretty significant developmental disorders, right? We have so many folks that, it's kind of ambiguous. Do they really have an unspecified schizophrenia spectrum disorder, or is this just, severe developmental disorder with lots of severe complex trauma from childhood, and then the substance, they've been on the street since they were kids and been using substances since they were kids, right? And have never gone to school, right? And so then these folks are ending up in our system, and like, it's very, very hard to figure out placements for them, right? You might get them housing, and then they always lose the housing. I mean, it's just numerous things that start happening, and they last months, and that's it. Maybe not even a year in housing, right? So I think those I think it's the TBIs with the developmental disorders with severe complex, childhood trauma that, all those things, and those people will have all of it often, right? They'll have the developmental disorder that, the complex trauma that leads to the developmental disorders that then leads to the substance use that then ends up with TBIs, right? And so they have the whole constellation of things, and then they're like, 32 years old, and we just got a young person, that I'm like, it's like, there's no connecting, right? We're getting also folks coming out of TAY, right? To us. And I'm like, you're talking to somebody, but nobody's there, right? So, right. So those folks, and they're going to be probably in ICM for the rest of their life, right? So they came from TAY, they came to us, and what's the possibility of them ever stepping down? What's so how do we work with this individual for the next, not just the next 6 months, but hopefully if they stay alive for the next 30, 40 years, right? And this high level of needing a high level of care.
It sounds like, because I think to go to the bottom of this slide, we're talking about, what is sort of, we have these flows and we're looking for like, what is the next step for this work that will help support the IWD advisory function. It sounds like, to Helly's point, I think it's been a challenge for us to try to have a two-dimensional linear map of things, but I hear from Member Short and Wong, like having more of the other pieces we've developed, like visualizations or actual just sort of like service lists and capacity available would be helpful. But from you, Member Salinas, I'm hearing like key populations, I think, perhaps, that are
they're going to be the people coming to care court.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Right. And that, I think that the services don't exist. Like, so it's also talking about what needs to be created, right? Like, how do we go back to, maybe having a place like Westside Lodge, things that have closed that could have held a person, they need a boarded care level of care, but they need to also have a place that would accept that they're probably, that they're going to be using, and that they're very, very low functioning. So how do you create something in the community? Because PSH doesn't cut it, right? And boarding cares also won't work with those folks, but they need that level of care, but modified to their needs.
I mean, this is a perfect setup for what I say all the time. It's kind of been my soapbox for a while, is that there's a certain tier or category of housing that does not exist in our city, and that more and more
Or maybe
people
anywhere.
right,
anywhere.
well, sure, but more and more people with high acuity are being placed into PSH, and they actually need a higher level of care. And so, as you said, they don't last there. They end up being evicted back out into the streets and back into the shelters. And it also creates problems for others in the buildings where they're placed. But they're being placed there because there's nowhere else, and they're considered high priority to get indoors because we don't want them on the streets. And it's just this big, but we're missing like a whole type of housing for folks like this. And part of that is because, I mean, if we weren't losing, hemorrhaging our board and care facilities, that would be helpful as well, because some of them, could do well in that setting. But there's also just sort of these more creative, I'm sure Steve would have a lot to say about this, like, just more creative types of housing options for people, right? And Steve's model, and Steve does provide a certain model that's an example of this kind of thing. But I think there's even more that we can create that are, responding to more of the emerging needs of like right now, both the time and the place, that if I, could do one thing to wave a magic wand, because we're kind of, I wouldn't go so far maybe to say counterproductive, but this thing where we're putting people with super high acuity into PSH that, like, as we said before, have case managers, but don't even have clinical care, is just not working. And then we're causing harm sometimes to the other folks who are trying to get stabilized in those buildings, et cetera. I mean, et cetera. Steve, you can fill out everything I missed.
Yeah, that was a very targeted, important observation, Sarah. It's part of the frustration I've had for some time in these discussions is I'm looking for an initiative that is a collaborative initiative between the IWG and the Department of Public Health around stating what our goal is as a system. Is it maintenance only, or is it maintenance, recovery, and opportunity? And I'll remind people, in 1995, everyone thought the people that were going to IMDs, the skilled nursing world, had to be there. The department thought it, everyone thought it. Progress Foundation delivered Clay Street as a program, and suddenly people were getting out of and not going to the IMDs because a kind of program that didn't exist before was opened in the community with a recovery and rehabilitation focus. And then it was replicated because it was successful. We keep looking at these situations in a static way, and it drives me crazy. We have yet to describe what the developed continuum of settings we need. It's no mystery to any of us that have worked in this for years. The advocacy is there, but the results aren't there. And I'm disappointed in the recent announcement from the Department of Public Health that they were going to streamline the development of 24-hour settings, but almost exclusively around getting beds in the IMDs faster and maybe expanding board and care. Nothing about treatment settings. So when are we going to talk about, we're a community treatment program, not a stabilize and maintenance only program. And that's where this use of the HSH, permanent supported housing for people we know aren't ready for it, is undermining the ability to imagine, look at a continuum of care that needs to be there, variety of outpatient, but also residential type settings that don't exist yet, but also expanding the ones that do work. We have lost more beds because of the Baker Places meltdown and a few other things in that step between acute care and community supported living than we've added in the last 10 years. And some of the impetus for mental health SF was to look at how do we build out that continuum of care so people move to levels of care where they have a chance to continue recovery, continue support. And we've got to get there in this group sometime. We're coming up on Proposition 1 in a couple of months on the ballot, where the governor's office is investing an enormous amount of money in community treatment and mainly 24-hour opportunities in the community. And if we're not ready as a system of care, if we're not ready to be as creative and as specific as possible about how we would like to use these potential resources should Prop 1 pass in March, we're just going to blow another opportunity to build a system of care that the IWG is responsible for working with the health department on describing and implementing. And there's no mystery. A group of 10 people could describe what the system needs, take it out to the community, and it would get overwhelming support when it's described. But we're not getting there. We keep using short-term strategies where we can find a bed to get people off the street. And we're not even talking about how that individual got to the street. What was when they first entered the system, what we didn't provide that would have prevented that outcome. All the things that make for what goes into describing a system of care in 2024. And we have to get there. We have to get there quickly, or we're going to blow the one opportunity through resources coming into our community to expand and develop a system that makes sense to our clients and has recovery as a goal, or we're just going to end up repeating the same mistakes over and over, and it's going to be a wasted opportunity. So let's start describing those things. And all the knowledge does not exist just in the health department. It exists in the community programs that have been working and struggling to find a relevant intervention that helps people move toward recovery in this system. And it's time that we started talking together and planning together. Thank you.
Maybe that's a good segue to the community engagement and just kind of wrapping up on that piece.
Yeah, and I had the thought, well, actually, listening to everyone talk, that I was like, maybe we actually need to collect scenarios in reverse, that we get some from the subject matter experts on the IWG that I would love to see. I think it perhaps is not helpful to only have the department introducing scenarios. So that's just a suggestion that I would propose, that I think we consider their representative scenarios for most at-risk populations that we are not adequately demonstrating here. I would feel like it would be great to document some of these comments from IWG members and scenarios. I want to note that we have a lovely set of presenters here to start at 10:30, so I'm going to be a little bit firm on time, but I just want to note where we are with some of the next steps. Our colleague from Interethnica had to hop off, but just want to note that she's been given all of these same flows to help inform the facilitation guide for the listening sessions. On our end, the department actually will be doing the recruitment for the provider listening session shortly, with the aim to do it in February. And I wanted to get a couple minutes of feedback on that if we could. So what I've been given is a list of basically contacts for all of our providers, but I'm concerned about open outreach to everybody that I think perhaps doesn't necessarily get us in the direction of like the targeted feedback we might need. And I wanted to open up to members if you have comments on types of feedback, like whether we just directly reach out to providers most sort of like implicated in like the MHSF priority population, so ICM, street teams, emergency, things like that, or if you would prefer open outreach. And then also, doesn't have to be right now, but feel free to email me and contact me with any, like, we know our forums for connecting with providers, but you may know of others that we don't. So I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts on recruitment.
So this is for providers, not consumers?
So our intention is to do the provider session and then use snowball sampling, so recommendations from providers and some support for outreach to consumers. And typically, it's been a more difficult thing to get consumer participation.
So there's a few sort of networks and coalitions of providers that I suggest you reach out to. And I could give you the names now or quickly. HESPA, which is Homeless Emergency Service Providers. There's a supportive housing provider network, and then there's the Human Services Network, just to start. But there are probably others that are much more mental health focused that I may not be aware of, but those are some places to start.
Maybe you could just ask in the ICM provider network, right?
Yeah.
for folks to
Mhm.
participate.
And yeah, and some of the flows were, you know, IC involved ICM, street, EMS, system, I would imagine. Um, Trying to think at a high level who else, and HSH and coordinated entry were part of that too.
And I think
That would be helpful. Does anybody have thoughts on like, 'cause I mean, this is to inform comments for you. I would say just like from a research hat, I do think perhaps blanket outreach and not targeted outreach will maybe lead us to more sort of broad results that might be a little harder to sort through. So I would suggest perhaps targeted outreach, but this is so guys, so
Can you explain the distinction? I mean, the blanket would be like what, more cold
Message-
calls and
just
and
message
more,
everybody on
Right.
the list I've been given.
right,
and
right.
See who shows up, kind of.
Pretty big.
Can you do a combo?
I think we could do targeted outreach, and if it doesn't yield much, do blanket outreach. But I think the question is, what populations are we most hoping to hear about?
Right, because I feel like if you do the blanket thing that you may not get a lot of response. But if you do the targeted, you may miss some important ones. And then in terms of I mean, I think you really want to look for covering all bases and making sure it's representative, especially of not just San Francisco population, but who tends to be in these programs and needing these kinds of services. So we want to make sure the African American community, you want to make sure the Latino community, and then also maybe geographically making sure you're covering bases too. So there's some groups in Chinatown, for instance, or who work with the Chinese speaking population. Immigrants, I think, is really important one in general. TAY as well as adults, seniors, just trying to get that full range as much as possible, and realizing that with some of these issues anyway, I know that there's demographics that show disproportionate representation of certain communities. So you want to make sure you're not missing those communities when you do this, right?
I mean, if you do an ask to the ICM providers, you have also, the team out at Mission Mental Health, right? And Mission Mental Health also has the specific, I can't remember what the program is called, that they have the program targeted to African American population. Alternatives. I mean, so you might specifically outreach to the ICM providers, and then those specific programs, like alternatives, Bayview Hunters Point Foundation, and then target to Rams.
Monique. Yes, the Monique.
I don't know that, is she there? I don't think she's
Oh, I
there
don't know.
anymore.
She's on leave.
She's
Yeah,
on leave.
well,
But there's Bayview Hunters Point Foundation that I think does, I mean, Rafiki does some mental health services, but Bayview Hunters Point, that's specifically, that's what they do, whereas Rafiki has kind of other sort of, but it's fine, Rafiki and Bayview Hunters Point, and then looking at Rams, right? Because Rams
Yeah.
Has the most robust also peer programs, right? And so you can cover a lot of those bases, right? And then CTNB doesn't have an ICM program, but you could reach out to them. RAM serves a large Asian population. We have the only specific though ICM at Citywide for the Cantonese, not just Chinese, Vietnamese, the monolingual ICM program. I mean, but you serve, if you reach out to those particular places, you can capture a lot of populations. Yeah.
Sorry, so much. I want to move us, if we could, to public comment, just to try to be respectful of everybody's time and keep us on schedule.
Thank you. So members of the public who wish to provide public comments on this agenda item, which is discussion item number 2, mapping and community engagement. well, first call on the people in person, and then the people, if you're joining online, please raise your virtual hand. If you are joining by phone, please press pound, then pound again, then dial *3, and that will raise your hand and we'll unmute you when it's your time to talk. And everybody will have 2 minutes. Looking and do not see any virtual hands raised. Put them down if anybody sees any hands. Chair, I suggest that we close public comments.
Okay. Okay, next, what we have is the DPH implementation report. And, who's gonna-
It's still warm.
Warm in here, warm outside today.
They're warm or cold?
Everyone, good to see you all again. I'm Kelly Kirkpatrick. I support the implementation, operations, budget elements of mental health SF. And as such, I also play a convening role. So I played the administrative convening role in our implementation report. So every year, the department is required to submit an implementation report to the mayor and the board. And it is due February 1st. Correct. And so we are coming to you before we submit it to the board and the mayor per the legislation to receive your feedback. I know, sorry, I'm sure as you can recognize from a bureaucratic institution, it took a lot of time and a lot of people to contribute, edit, give feedback on the report. So we sent it to you yesterday and asking for a review over the next week before we submit. So you have a week to look at it. Happy to jump to the next slide to give a little context. Next slide, please. So as I already shared, we're submitting it on February 1st. We did share the report with you all last year, and we are doing process improvements to bring it to you sooner than we had last year. And our goal is to continue to try to bring it sooner to you all. But in general, it provides a summary of the MHSF structure, funding, priority populations, and core metrics, things you all know so well. But again, this is a report for the mayor and the board and the public in general. And then we do a kind of 2-part look back on implementation milestones from the prior year. So this will include 2023 milestones, and then some kind of programmatic and data goals for the year ahead. And in my kind of area of expertise, there is a section at the back that discusses the budget elements to support key mental health SF programs at the end. So again, we'll give the caveat that I'm not the subject matter expert, as you all know, on the programmatic elements in the report. So if you have any questions on the programmatic elements that I'm outlining, I believe many of the domain folks leaders will be here later in this meeting today. So happy to triage those, but I'm happy to answer any questions on process or budget or take them back to folks to get back to you. So this presentation will be brief. Although the report itself is about 24 pages. I think you all should know it really well, though. No surprises.
Like 2 pages a day, no. 3 pages a day, maybe. For a week. Okay, review.
Again, it's many things. It like provides the org chart for MHSF and overview of the 4 domains. You all know that really well.
Yeah,
So if you went to the 2023 and 2024 sections, I think those would probably be where the meat of what you would be interested in. So just recapping, as the report does, in 2023, we implemented the systematic kind of follow-up of OCC for individuals with recent SCRT encounters and 5150 psychiatric holds at ZSFG. We launched the Best Neighborhoods teams to connect unhoused residents to behavioral health care, focusing again on SCRT follow-up and clients. The Permanent Housing Advanced Clinical Services, FACS, which is a joint program between the OCC and whole person integrated care, which is overseen by ambulatory care. Basically, OCC oversees the behavioral health services at PSH, and WIPIC oversees the physical health services at PSH. We expanded to cover a total of nearly 100 PSH units, which is housed more than 6,200 residents. Last year, we expanded the hours of the Behavioral Health Access Center to now include weekends from 9 to 4. And the year before that, we of course extended into evenings. So now the BHAC is open, I believe, from 8 to 7, Monday through Friday, and now on weekends as well from 9 to 4. And then under the new beds and facilities work, we added the 70 new residential step-down beds on Treasure Island, as well as ramped up the capacity of the MINA project from about 45 to 75. Also not on here is a small increase in the managed alcohol program, but it is included in the report. They're now serving about 15 clients at a new site. Next slide. And then looking forward, what we outlined, some of the key goals for 2024 is that further expanding OCC capacity to include review for folks not at CSFG at other hospitals, and just further expanding the number of behavioral health priority clients, and expanding our behavioral health services for PSH residents. Again, that behavioral health component of FACS is overseen by OCC. So they're going to work to further expand the behavioral health presence at PSH. We will strengthen our centralized pathways for behavioral health services for people transitioning from the justice system in collaboration with jail health services and the sheriff's department, which is in alignment with CalAIM. We will begin construction of the crisis stabilization unit early this year, with construction anticipated to be done at the end of the year. We are continuing to explore and negotiate potential acquisitions of facilities to house a mental health service center, enhanced dual diagnosis program, and TAE behavioral health recovery program. The MHSF staffing analysis is expected to be completed and shared with you all in early 2024, and our A&E team, analytics and evaluation team, have had some staffing challenges, which I'm sure you're aware of over the last year. They've hired many new people, and we're hoping to improve and grow the kind of evaluation of MHSF programs and the core metrics over the next year. The next slide, please. Funding. This is largely the same from prior years. So the largest single source of new funding for new MHSF programs over the last 2 to 3 years, has been Proposition C. DPH receives 25% of Prop C. And so our cut has historically been about $90 to $100 million a year. The majority of the rest of it goes to HSH. And of that, approximately 90 to 100 million, about 60 million funds the new MHSF initiatives outlined here. All the new staff under all of our BEST and triage teams, administrative staff under OCC funded by Prop C, our Best Neighborhoods teams, and the fire department's functions of SCRT are funded by Prop C. The expansion of hours at the BHAC and OBIC are funded by Prop C at the Mental Health Service Center. And the largest allocation of Prop C is going to the significant, about, I think it's 350 of our 400 bed expansion are funded by Prop C. And so that's about $36 million. I will say too, Prop C faces sustained ongoing shortfalls. Projections are about 30 to 40% lower from when they were initially, the spending plan was initially created back in 2020. It's largely due to it being a single source business tax on the highest earning businesses in San Francisco. It's been a pretty tumultuous, to say the least, kind of business climate in the downtown in particular, which has impacted Prop C. So we are working with the Our City, Our Home Committee, OCO, to align our spending plan over the coming budget. We are just now kicking off the budget planning for Prop C with OCO. I think their meeting is this Thursday. And over the next 2 months, we'll work to kind of figure out a path forward. There is the potential use of one-time funding. We do have a significant balance in one-time acquisition funds. And we may have to utilize some of those funds to kind of shore up our ongoing funding, our ongoing programs. And that'll be a choice we'll have to make, either not buy as many buildings, try and find leases potentially to meet our remaining programmatic goals, or kind of use it as a reserve on these ongoing programs. So next slide. And I will say, if any significant changes are planned for Prop C and MHSF programs over the next 2 months, we will of course come back to you all to give you opportunities for feedback. And sorry, again, budget person, I spent a lot of time on budget, but we're asking if you would like to review the plan and submit feedback by this Friday to Valerie. And I think this is just a reiteration of some of the key kind of roles that you play in supporting us. Yes.
Steve,
As you noted, this came to us yesterday about 4:30.
Yes.
I didn't get a chance to read it last night till after 10. This other engagement, so I can't say I've read this line by line, page by page. When the IWG did its report earlier, we talked about the mental health SF ordinance focused on transforming the system of care. And we noted an opportunity, number one, that we wanted to focus on system of care rather than discrete programs. In reading the report, and maybe I missed it, so if I missed it, please correct me. I don't see the vision thing. I don't see in the report where the department is looking to transform the system. I think it's really well done in terms of going through the discrete components of mental health SF, of going through progress in each one, going through goals for each one. But I don't see the stitching. I don't see the report identifying how the department views the evolution of all these components into a system of care and continuum and the continuum of care. And so I think it would be helpful to the department to articulate something in the report to the mayor, to the board, and to the end of the public. That's my real 40,000-foot view of the report.
I appreciate that. And that was definitely a goal, but I think perhaps could definitely be elevated in the report. So I hear that. I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to call on you.
No,
but
you
I'm gonna
can.
take your questions.
Wait, I guess I was waiting for somebody to. When I just noticed that on page 6, this graphic around the target population
Mhm.
and with this overlap between the SMI and SED being 35%. And I'm just wondering, I guess to me that seems low, but maybe it's looking at everyone, not just it's like everyone across all the different programs in the city, because I think maybe at the lower levels of care, there's a lot less overlap. Whereas for us in the ICMs, like it's way higher than that. So I guess I just had that question. So you're looking at like everyone, people that are out at Sunset Mental Health, right? Where there's probably very low dual diagnosis in that way, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great question, because remember, this is still a subset. It's still the subset that is experiencing homelessness. So you would expect, I think,
Because that's really low.
more
Okay, so
overlap.
this is folks.
But it's based on
Self-reporting.
diagnosis codes and
And
yeah, it's all, well,
Wait,
I'm not sure.
so
Well,
there was a
well,
report on the priority population.
Yeah.
So I can pull that and recirculate it so we can
look at methods if you'd like.
Right, but I mean,
Like
but
that's
we're looking
really
at a
low.
bunch of different data sources for this. I mean, this one's like really complex to pull, is who currently is homeless, has either mental health or substance use, a serious mental health diagnosis, that like one of the list of
So not just
diagnosis codes.
depression, but
No,
but the
yeah, and then they have to sort of cross match against all these, from all the different electronic systems. I mean, so I think it probably is an undercount, and maybe it's worth, I don't know if there's a way to add some language around like how hard it is to gather this particular data point. It's so hard.
I think two parts, yeah. Valerie can recirculate. Monica Rose did a whole presentation on how we got to these numbers. And then I think that Amy is going to revisit over the next year the priority population data to refine it as well, to take a relook at it. I believe that is one component of their work plan for the next
It'll be
year.
really interesting to see. I mean, that number stands out, that you're calling out the 35%. And it's gonna be really interesting to see, like, evolve 2 years later, whether AD finds
Mhm.
a lot more. So I would expect it to be more.
much higher. And I think with our population, it's so,
Yeah.
it's like really high, probably 85 or something, right? But, and then I guess just coming to the kind of this proposition, the hoped for Proposition A funding, and just looking at like, I guess I'm just gonna go back to like, is there ever gonna be a time when the department is considering rehabbing 7A? I think, and that there's no
7A
at the general,
Hospital, yeah.
at the general, just because, there's been literally rotation of like 2 beds, right? And so, folks are staying really long times in the ED all over the city, and that's beds that could be going, particularly now that it's winter, to folks who are, have COVID and other, physical illness. And then in tandem with this, like looking at properties for residential treatment. I think we don't have anybody anymore going to dual diagnosis residential treatment in the community, right? Everyone goes from the hospital or from jail, right? There's just not the possibility. It's just, there's not that, it just doesn't exist anymore for someone coming from the community. But someone has to be stabilized at the hospital. And so you've got folks just never making it into the inpatient to stabilize, to then get accepted into one of the dual diagnosis programs. And they really don't do well, again, at the substance use program. Again, you're not going to go, and you don't go from the hospital to Harbor Lights. That also just doesn't happen, right? So you have to have the beds for someone to stabilize, and the time it takes to do that application, to get interviewed, and then to get a bed. And so you could really look at, in that way, having the system, a better system flow, if you could have more of the dual diagnosis programs and another unit at the hospital. And then maybe you aren't having the situation where years and years go by where you're doing this cycling out of the ED, and maybe, short hospital stays, and maybe they get to a program, but they've not been stabilized. So then they leave after a day, right? And then you get to a point where we're having then to conserve them, and then they have to go to LSAT because of disease progression, right? And so I think those sort of things that then that's so much more costly to send someone to LSAT than if you could have sent them, stabilize them, much earlier on with the hospital stay. Yeah, or been able to have that, maybe once every couple of years they need that sort of a tune-up and go back to program, which it used to be how things were, and then you can go back home. And so just looking at how maybe those funds could be better used in that way, so that we don't end up with so many folks needing more expensive care.
I think, we do, outline that dual diagnosis is one of those sticky programs that we've had trouble expanding for a variety of kind of logistical and programmatic reasons, but really trying our best to take a multi-pronged approach to trying to pursue new properties, trying to work with providers to find capacity, and expand, looking for opportunities out of county to really kind of, again, increase the capacity for dual diagnosis flow.
I would say though, it's really hard. I mean, it's hard enough for us. I mean, this is a whole other thing. I mean, it's hard enough for us to visit, to have a care coordination with folks here in the city, let alone care coordination and discharge planning with someone out of county.
I mean, out of county is an interim, like we need it, some capacity is better than no capacity while we try and build the in-county capacity actively with providers right now.
Steve Fields online.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the content of an interesting discussion. I have some very divergent points of view from Andrea's characterization of what she's accurately describing what's happening. It's not what should be or could be happening. And the dual diagnosis capability in community programs has been there. It's expanding and trying to get stronger, but has always been there. The problem is the hospital stopped diverting to residential treatment in the community. And that's why they're using their beds for whatever reason. And again, I've said this over and over, and it's frustrating to me that the system has not looked at whether or not the system understands that there is a system of programs that can do a lot of diversion. The acute diversion programs, basic client population now is dual diagnosis, and they come from door urgent care. So they are being diverted, or they're coming out of jail to the transitional program. So, at some point it would be interesting to have a discussion from different points of view, the ICM point of view, the hospital, but also the community-based programs that are trying to struggle with a change of policy, basically, at San Francisco General Hospital, not to divert to the community out of the emergency room. That's in fact a policy and practice for them. It has nothing to do with the level of client need. And it has never been fully examined. I think the department has to look at it as a relationship issue of how we build a community system of care. So there's so many patterns that were in place before the pandemic and before this particular decision was made by the emergency room to change their policy to not divert, but to hospitalize or send out to the street people who are in the emergency room. We need to look at that client flow issue in a different way. Nothing happened clinically that required that the hospital stop diverting from PES to community programs like door urgent care and like the ADUs. So if we're talking about building the capacity in the community, and Kelly knows that there are discussions trying to get a dual diagnosis program up and running, and it's as possible to do as anything else that we're working on if we just concentrated on getting that going and open. So that's going to be our big challenge in the coming year, but we're going to have to re-examine the relationship between the hospital and the community-based programs that does not require that they be hospitalized first before they start making contact with 24-hour care in the community. That is a waste. That's an expensive methodology. And we had a methodology that was working before the hospital changed its policy and its practice. And I think even people within the department understand that needs to be looked at again, but it's taking forever to get it addressed. And the system of care is going to depend upon a more comprehensive relationship between PES at San Francisco General, the inpatient units, and the 24-hour capacity at all different levels in the community before we're really going to make progress in understanding which kind of levels of care we need and what can work best to avoid unnecessary hospitalizations. It's funny, diversion now happens from jail. I mean, Andrea is right about that. That's not the system we wanted, but that's where the referrals are coming because we don't have an appropriate relationship with our biggest and most important 24-hour involuntary psychiatric hospital right now.
Okay, I think we need to move to our break. is our next thing, but we need to move from this item. Thank you, Steve. We're done with this. Thank you.
So first we
Kelly.
need to do public comment. I mean, you don't need to say Kelly, but like before we get to the break, we need to do the public comment for this discussion item, if that is okay, Chair.
Yep.
So members of the public who wish to provide comment for agenda item 3, which is the implementation report, are invited to participate in 3 ways. In person, online, or by phone. And I'm actually, let me make sure, I don't actually see any members of the public. Yeah, so close public comment.
Great. So we have a 5-minute break scheduled. So we'll be back here at 11.
Cupcakes,
They are amazing.
they are from the
They
cafe.
taste super fancy.
The cream, is it on the cream cheese or is it?
Buttercream frosting on the one I had.
Oh, back.
So
good. Let's go. Wow.
For me, Valentine's.
Yeah. You come down to the 3rd floor, they're not key carded there. So
Okay.
I don't know how to navigate,
yeah.
where to go.
Yeah, it's a real rat's nest. Yeah.
No, the team was very enthusiastic in their round robin slides. I asked them to keep it
I know, I was
brief,
like,
but they're fairly
yeah.
heavy on content, so we're gonna have to sort of be mindful of time. I think keep it to about 20 minutes for Hillary and 10 minutes per domain.
yeah,
Um,
and obviously they can come back. you know, so it's like,
Yes.
you know.
yeah, they were a little bit more than the amount of content I asked for, so.
Overachievers.
Overachievers. Overachievers work at TPH. I told Kelly recently, for all the kids, we did all the group projects by ourselves.
And all the extra credit. And all the extra credit.
Really though, those cupcakes. It's like one of those fancy cupcakes.
For a dozen, it's $15.
Nice.
It is, they are
To
amazing.
come over here and
order them ahead of time?
I did, but I like, there's an online form and stuff.
I gotta start using.
help me get through security to get cupcakes sometime.
I just, well, oh.
No, I mean
don't
downstairs.
recognize it.
Oh, you don't either. Yeah.
Then I know.
Downstairs to come up and get cupcakes.
I know, it's really kind of, yeah. I wonder if you just went to downstairs and said, I ordered cupcakes from the 5th floor.
I think if you said you ordered a catering, you made a catering order.
Yeah,
from
if you had, like, they
somewhere.
sent an email, so like I had an email that proved that I ordered cupcakes. So I feel like that should be enough to get you in.
Yum.
And I've never had any of their like real food, but it.
I used to work right here and their sandwich, they have just like really simple turkey sandwich on toasted sourdough. It's so good. It's just like a
Yeah.
really simple sandwich.
Exactly, it's like, do something simple and do it well, that's.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a citywide program.
Yeah. And they're so friendly. Oh my
That's
God.
what you want? Oh, okay.
Slice of Life is part of our
I
voc.
thought it was rent. Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, they're part of our voc program.
Well, whatever,
They do a nice.
yeah, they really do an amazing job.
Yeah, nice to see you.
nice because I'm on right.
Most of the folks though are not from our clinic per se. I mean, because anybody can come from any of the mental health.
It's not a voting item, so I think we should.
Yeah, what?
It's not a voting.
Once you have quorum, you have quorum, you just can't vote on.
Oh, so I don't need her back.
You don't need to.
We need to maintain firm for like voting.
A
items,
vote,
And I
right,
will, I
okay.
will note,
I can still
Alana
see.
has an appointment to go to.
Yeah,
so she'll
right.
be leaving shortly, after which we do not have quorum, so we cannot do any, we will be like in a recess state. We can still come to agenda items and not do any actionable piece.
We don't have anything on the agenda.
That need
scheduled for-
action, I don't believe so, no, but. Yeah, I think it may be, we may not be able to make a lot of active decisions about next month's agenda, but we can review the potential.
And we can make suggestions.
Yes, we can make suggestions, we can continue to discuss, we just
Yeah,
can't,
it will, yeah. let's
can't
do
make
discussion.
recommendations, we can't take actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna recommend we get the bread pudding
Well,
next week.
so you will.
Guess we can't vote on that. Okay. Well. Okay.
The bread pudding is outstanding.
Recommendation without objection.
Actually, Amy's still here, so. Alrighty, shall we? I am calling us to order, I suppose, some kind of order at least. And we have Dr. Cunnins here for the update, which is awesome.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and pass it to her.
Okay, great.
Morning, everyone. Good to see everyone. Um, so, so we are, so after my updates, the team will provide some short updates on each of the domains. And so this is, I think, the first time we're doing this kind of new round robin model. And you'll tell us, we'll see how it goes. If we can, I guess, hold questions. I know Valerie said I'm on a tight timeline. Hold questions till 11:20. So I want to do some general updates and then I have some slides. So first, just some general updates. I want to make everyone aware that Supervisor Mandelman has introduced a hearing request. I think I mentioned it last time that it was coming on our expansion of residential treatment. We expect this to be February 21st. Our hope and plan is to review the presentation, including the results of the bed optimization study, which we're sort of trying to finalize. And so we'll be able to preview that with this group, get your feedback, but also note that we can come back and do more in depth too, should people want. We also are finalizing, finally, our work around wait times for different levels of care that we have long promised. We've been doing some validation, revalidation, and so I think it's in a good place, and we're looking forward to sort of sharing that with the group and then ongoing. The next general update is membership. I met with Supervisor Ronan last Friday. We again sort of discussed the situation of membership, need for more members, and reaching quorum, and we are working on details with Supervisor Ronan. We'll reach out to you each in the coming weeks for help increasing membership so that we can get to quorum on a regular basis, and we'll provide more updates. We'll continue to meet with her office.
May I don't know if this comes from you or from Valerie or Jennifer, but it would be great to have also an understanding of who has applied for what seat, who's already kind of in the running, and then where we are in that process. Some people may have, and sort of, so if we're doing recruitment, we can know where the holes are, but also if there's already major competition, maybe we don't want to,
Right.
recruiting and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can do that. Okay. My last general update is to acknowledge member Hallie Hammer.
Guys get it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got it.
I'm sure you got it.
I think I heard that
Wave
first.
and
It was great.
Sure.
So first of all, just Hallie, thank you from me personally. I just want to acknowledge during my tenure that Member Hammer has made enormous contributions to this group, often from behind the scenes, because she is modest and humble and
Can't touch this.
and
Sorry.
she, for my own coming on in this role, has helped me figure out and be a better leader of the behavioral health section. I think you all know that behavioral health used to be under Hallie and under ambulatory care, and really fostered both the work around the legislation, around the formation, I don't know what the right word is, formation of the IWG, and of course has been serving as a member since the outset. So we're gonna really miss you, Hallie. I think this group, we've learned a lot from your participation and leadership and thoughtfulness. I will try to carry it forward. I know we all will, and so we want to thank you. Here's the certificate to
Certificate of completion.
And so that's in progress.
That's all the taxpayers will have.
So I'm sorry I don't have that with us today, but I.
Thank you, thank you.
And I don't know if, yes, like.
Yeah,
A place to hang it.
I'll add, from the IWG, that it's been really, really helpful to have you here. You've been a great member just in terms of, collegial, spirit and, participation has been stellar, probably better than anybody here. And then your thoughtfulness and your, insight and your experience. And then, yeah, you're rolling up your sleeves and doing the work has been so very helpful. And really, really thank you for your service.
Thanks. Well, I'll just say, I mean, I think the work that we did together, members of the community and leaders throughout the community-based organizations and other systems that provide care for this population, like we all came together and the members of the Board of Supervisors who were really, really committed to improving our system of care for the population of San Franciscans who most needs us to provide barrier-free, really person-centered, compassionate care, accessible care. That process that we participated in over about a year or so was, I think, feels in looking back like really one of the highlights of my now 30-year career in the DPH, and getting to know Member Eisen, Member Fields, Member Short, Member Salinas, so many people who were involved early on in the crafting of Mental Health San Francisco, and then just being able to bring Director Cuttins on and bringing her expertise and knowledge of complex systems and bring it here to San Francisco. I think we're just, and then build this incredible team, this Mental Health SF team. It's really fulfilling to see it moving forward, along with all the frustrations that we all experience. But I think we've really seen some progress, and I know it firsthand as a provider of care in the DPH, that I can get things for patients that I never used to be able to get for them. And I thank each of you for your hand in making that happen. So it's really been a pleasure and an honor to serve with you all.
Real quick, I wanted to say thank you. As the novice of this group, I appreciate your expertise, your thoughtfulness, and clearly your compassion. It's really been you've been an important part for me of the IWG, and so that's why thank you. And I'll say to the director, how quickly can you appoint because we're going to be down to,
Can I just say one more thing? And I should have mentioned Member Wong, we were at those tables together early on at City Hall. So I meant to mention, yeah, thank you.
And I hear with Member Hammer's departure, it further raises the urgency of.
Yeah.
So.
I think the thing that Dr. Hammer brings is like such a precise way of articulating clinical formulations, right? And that I think we really need. It's like so, and so it's really helpful. It's been really helpful, and so I feel like I'm crying now. But hopefully we get somebody with that caliber, yeah. So that, because it really helps everyone understand.
Thank you for all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Last but not least, turning the emotion. Sorry, I should have done.
We're all sad already.
Next slide. So I just wanted to share with this group sort of current state of play in terms of the budget in the city. I'm going to be sharing with you sort of pretty high level where we're at the department in terms of budget planning. As I'm speaking, the Prop C work is not included in this, so I just want to also be clear about that. So the top line, as you can see, is the approximate both DPH and then BHS budget for this year. I think, as you all know, our economic reality remains challenging because of reduced revenue expectations, particularly in the areas you see named there, transfer, hotel, and sales taxes. Our situation is also challenging because of healthcare costs, with a 9% projected increase in employee healthcare costs for next year, and then multi-year inflationary growth on contracts with community-based organizations, which is part of a new local ordinance. As a result, the mayor's office has asked departments to make a 10% reduction in general fund with an additional 5% in contingency cut.
Can you explain what that is? the
Yes.
contingency?
That
target?
means what we will internally try to identify, but isn't to meet what is hoped to be only 10% cut.
Okay.
For DPH, this amounts to, for next fiscal year, 110 million. For the following fiscal year, it amounts to 128 million. Why it's not the same, don't ask me. And then the contingency, that additional 5% is about 50 million. Next slide. So our approach is and has been, we have begun meeting with stakeholders, both internal and external, to review cost efficiencies and savings. This is happening departmental wide. We're reviewing vacant positions. Our overarching objective is to retain core services and minimize impact on clients and patients. We are also aiming to find opportunities to maximize revenue from all sources and be able to shift costs from general fund to other sources. Next slide. So the budget timeline, we are circled where we are now, December to February. We are undertaking departmental review, finding opportunities to reduce general fund expenditures. These opportunities are getting reviewed by our fiscal team, our departmental team. I think this is, and then it goes to the mayor's office for review, and then finally to the Board of Supervisors, where the budget would get ratified, if that's the correct term. Let me just say a couple more words about general fund, BHS, and also Prop C. So general fund comprises about 30% of the BHS budget. So we are already kind of a diversified part of the department in terms of Medi-Cal revenue, in terms of what are called state block grants, which fund behavioral health services, and in terms of grants, which is the smallest part. The other thing is we've not gotten direction about Proposition C funding yet, or that money is, as you all know, a result of a local tax. And so revenues are also projected to decrease. We last year elected to, with the Our City, Our Home Committee approval, use some of the capital expenses or operating expenses. That does mean that we will face what's called a fiscal cliff in a couple of years where unless the economy turns around, where we will face declining revenue for Proposition C funded programming. So stay tuned for more on that. Of course, this work and our work together is, inextricably linked to the general fund funded work. So it's not, even if Prop C programs are not taking a direct cut, it is operating in an environment where other cuts are happening. So that's what I've got on that. Stay tuned. I will come back to you as we know more. Okay.
Questions, comments? Yeah, that's the comment, yeah.
I think we have our domain leads ready.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. Just a
Everfield.
quick question. In the timeline, Director Cunnins is there a set time for the Health Commission to hear the presentation that eventually is targeted to go to the mayor?
Yes, and that date is when the budget's going to the Health Commission. It's in February sometime.
It's the last one in February. I can look.
We will send out that date, Member Fields. We think late February.
And traditionally, and I assume it's the same, that'll be a point at which the public can comment on the
Yes.
contract, on the present. Yeah, great. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And so we'll get that out and also invite all of you to comment, of course.
I believe it's February 20th.
We believe it's February 20th. We will confirm.
Question for future discussion. Has the department been looking at the impact on MSFS, MHSA, et
MHSA.
cetera, if the mayor's drug testing initiative passes? You can defer that if you want to for a future meeting, but I think at some point.
Can you say, and I assume your question behind that is if more people are.
Capacity.
Capacity.
Yes.
Yes, and I think the numbers need to we are working with HSA, trying to understand the impact. I think the main thing I want to just remind everyone is that treatment, I'm saying an obvious point, treatment comes in multiple modalities, and so there is sufficient capacity in parts of our treatment programming, including outpatient medication treatment, including most of the time in residential treatment, though it does at times slow up. We also, I think, discussed with this group the possibility of new legislation that's going to be coming before the board that will allow us to contract more easily with residential care and treatment programming, which for which the consequences, for example, if we run out of space, we will more easily be able to identify, for example, on a temporary basis, out of county providers to be able to turn on those services more readily. This is not specific consequence of that program, but more generally, by way of example, this may be when we lost access to withdrawal management beds because of a COVID outbreak among staff. It took us a while to find more out-of-county beds to substitute. So that we think will help us there.
Just to clarify, when you said there's adequate capacity with some programs, did you mean currently, or if, say, the 2,000 general assistance recipients were required to go to treatment, that would be able to withstand that?
So I think we are still doing numeric estimates
Yeah.
of what we actually expect to come in.
Okay.
And we think it's
you're feeling like it could be adequate. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, we should move on to the,
I just wanted to confirm, for Steve, the next budget hearing is actually February 6th, Steve, at the 4 o'clock, Health Commission meeting.
So 2 weeks from today, February 6th.
wait, could that be something that is sent out by the IWG? Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Okay, so now we have an update on OCC. Who's doing that?
We have Heather online.
Oh, okay, cool. Hi, Heather.
Hi, good morning. Nice to see everybody. So one major update that I will share about OCC, which I am personally very excited about, is that we have some additional data analytics support within OCC, working closely with Mental Health SF and our quality management department, but really focused on being able to dig into some of the OCC data. So we're going to be increasing our capacity to really look at data. And some of what I'll be showing today is a result of that, that additional data analytic capacity. So I'm showing a few slides related to our OCC's work. The first slide here that we're looking at are monthly new referrals to the Office of Coordinated Care. These referrals represent our Behavioral Health Access Center, Behavioral Health Access Line, and our Triage and Transition Support Team, which for OCC are the three main portals for referrals into the Office of Coordinated Care. What happens with these referrals once they're made is they may get directed directly to treatment. They may be connected to one of Office of Coordinated Care's field-based follow-up teams or both simultaneously. The green represents our triage team, yellow Behavioral Health Access Line, and then the orange our Behavioral Health Access Center. And just to note, these are referrals. This is data from Epic. So what this represents is only those referrals that were made for people who were really ready to give us their name, to really engage and be referred to treatment. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. This data is for July through December. And so it doesn't take the whole all of 2023, but we had several kind of key expansions that happened during 2023, including our triage team beginning to follow up on street crisis response team referrals, triage beginning to do systematic follow-up using the involuntary holds report from San Francisco General Hospital, and then BHAC expanding to weekend hours. So we saw for July through December of 2023, 2,500 or 2,535 to be totally precise, distinct people who came through OCC's doors. And some of those might have been repeats, but these are the distinct number of people who came through in terms of referrals. If I could have the next slide. This represents, we've talked some, actually, I think Valerie, these may have gotten out of order, or could I get maybe the next slide and then we'll toggle back to this one? There should be a, there we go. Okay. So we, as I mentioned in that first slide, that slide only represented those referrals that were in Epic. During fall of 2023, we added some capacity to start better tracking. I should say better tracking, just more, we actually have tools within Epic to streamline the tracking of people who are walking into BHAC or calling BHAL who may be ready for some engagement, but are not ready to give their names, are not yet seeking treatment, but are ready to come maybe learn more information about services. BHAC, for example, has some engagement tools, hygiene kits that they give out, can help connect people with eligibility services. And so what this represents is, on top of what we just saw on the first slide, additional walk-ins into the Behavioral Health Access Center, requesting information or other referrals. Some people may get referred to coordinated entry because they're searching for housing. And if I could get the next slide. This
This is the one that was the one before. We could also go
Yeah.
to the next one.
Yeah,
Multicolored one, the two ahead,
okay,
one more. That one,
there we go. Thank you, thank you. Actually, one back.
one back.
We added some additional slides in here. Exactly. So this shows exactly what I just described, but for the behavioral health access line, which is our 24/7 access line, people call for connection to behavioral health services. So again, these are people who called who may not have been ready to be connected to treatment. It may be community members, it may be family members seeking information about how to connect people into services. Okay, and if I could get then the actual next slide, I think is the maybe not the best, maybe actually 2 slides back to the best neighborhoods engagements. That really mirrors what's on here,
That's,
but I think clear.
one more back, yep.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you. So we have talked a little bit, I think probably at our last update, about the new Best Neighborhoods team that was created out of the Street Crisis Response Team reconfiguration, really expanding our ability to do really street-based, kind of focused and neighborhood-based outreach and engagement for people who are unhoused and have behavioral health needs, as well as concentrating follow-up for the Street Crisis Response Team within the Office of Coordinated Care. So we just wanted to bring a little bit of data back to show their engagement. This is only for December of 2023, but shows the number of engagements that they're having on a weekly basis, and then rolled up into monthly. So for December, there were, as the total for December were 457 engagements with people out in the community who are unhoused and in need of behavioral health intervention. This includes people who are referred by other members of the coordinated street response within the city, people who need follow-up after street crisis response team, people who are just encountered during regular kind of routine outreach, other people who are referred from our triage team who might have exited the hospital and PES or ED and in need of follow-up and outreach. So it encompasses a wide variety of people. And the rest of the slides on here are actually duplicative of what I just showed. So I will pause there. I know there may be questions about this data and about services.
Questions?
Heather, for the number of engagements, do you set a target for each of the teams, or are you sort of tracking trends overall?
Right now, we are tracking trends overall. I think we really want to understand what the need is. But yeah, right now it's trends overall.
I know there's like, I guess I'm confused. So the best neighborhoods is the team that's working with SCIRT, yeah? I'm confused, right? Because there's several different OC. So there's the best team, and then there's best neighborhoods team, right? So this is
That's right.
the neighborhoods team. Okay, I'm getting confused about all the
Yeah.
teams and their roles. Yeah, you would.
Yes.
So these are folks that are encounters that initiate through SCIRT, or it's more than SCIRT though. It's like
yes.
hospitals too. And
It
then
can
those
be.
folks potentially then get referred from neighborhoods to the best team.
They don't. So I mean, that's not a usual course. So we have our best, what we are now calling our best care management team. That was kind of the first best standing for Bridge and Engagement Services team. And because that is kind of a model that we're using within OCC, we adopted best for best neighborhoods. So we have our best care management team, our best neighborhoods team.
Branding.
Yes, we're trying. It's a learning process. So it's really, our triage team is the central kind of referral point, and they are really looking at They review every street crisis response referral that indicates OCC follow-up is needed. They direct it to the right team. Often it's going to the Best Neighborhoods team. For some people, the street crisis response team drops off at the hospital, for example. Best Care Management might pick them up because they're doing a lot of work with the hospital. But Best Neighborhoods is, I think, to answer your other question, is doing work beyond just street crisis response team follow-up. So it's really embedded within the coordinated city coordinated street response, working very closely with other city departments to make sure that people who have high behavioral health needs and who are unhoused get connected to the services they need.
Well, since Member Salinas highlighted this, can you once again explain that distinction between best neighborhoods and best care team? Did I even get the terminology right?
Best Care Management, yes.
There's Best Care Management and then there's Best Neighborhoods. Those are the two.
There's
Okay,
a good in that there's an explanation. That's why I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Then we don't need to do that if it's
I mean,
right there in black and white.
that's why I was like confused because I
Right.
read this last night and there were so many teams. And so then I was seeing this, so I was trying to like figure out how these slides match up with the different teams.
Well, so did that clear it up for you in terms of those two, the distinction between those two?
Yeah, so I just realized from the best neighborhoods, it's actually because what it says in the implementation report is that these folks work with the skirt team, but it looks like they not only work with the skirt team, but even beyond. So it's even more than what they're doing even more than what the implementation report describes as their role, I think, with the neighborhoods.
I think the report was, skirt. It wasn't, what do you call it, all inclusive.
And if I may just, and I'm sorry to be bossy about
Yeah,
time,
okay.
we have other
Yeah.
domains reading too. I just want to remind that following the presentation at SCRT from Fire, we did discuss having an opportunity this year to schedule Heather to come back to talk about this follow-up care in more depth
Okay.
with everybody. So I think we
Gotcha. We'll
You'll
move
have an
on. We'll move on.
Can I just ask though a quick question? What does transfers mean though with this? I mean, so so referrals means they're getting referred to some team. There's referrals administrative, referrals clinical, and then transfers. I guess just what do those categories mean? That's probably the only question I should have asked.
You're talking about the BHAL, sure BHAC data.
So there's, in a number of them, it says referrals, administrative, and transfers. And one of them says also referrals, clinical. What are those categories
At
mean?
the bottom of the table on the right, very last row.
So, yeah, these are, I mean, I will say they're broad categories with a lot of things, kind of specific instances. Everybody is walking in with a very kind of specific instance that are rolled up. But the referrals administrative may mean that they're referring into something like our eligibility team, that it's really, it's not a clinical referral that they're making. Transfers is really, I think, largely, this probably does not happen as much for our BHAC as for our BHAL line, but because it is the central advertised number, there are people calling who need a lot of different things within BHS, so it may be kind of helping them get connected to the right place.
Steve.
Yeah, Heather, I have a quick question about these various teams. I'm going to work on a spreadsheet to figure them out again. But is the central issue around whether or not there's any revenue attached to this cost, whether or not they agree to enter into the Epic system? Or is that just entering in the Epic system? There's not necessarily any revenue attached to these interventions, right?
That's right. And this is just initial connection into services.
Oh, so Director Cunnen's report about, one of the priorities for the budget cuts and reductions is looking at revenue, making sure we maintain, if they're relevant, revenue producing programs as opposed to general funds. So these outreach teams are all general fund dependent at this point.
Well, I should clarify, when we're talking about the Epic-based referrals, those are just referrals into our system. Epic is the way that we are tracking those incoming requests to our system. So that's what I showed on the first. That's not revenue dependent. We do have revenue coming in, for example, for our best care management team is providing enhanced care management services through CalAIM via contract with Services for Health Plan and Anthem and Medi-Cal managed care plans, so that team is generating revenue.
Okay,
But
but the implication of trying to get people to engage, there is a step they need to take, whether it's the other best team or not, whether or not there's revenue attached to it. If they continue to hold back and say, I don't want to get into your system, then revenue is not going to be possible.
Right. Yeah,
At
if I
all.
may, let me just jump in for a sec, because two related questions. So one, remember that the money that's funding, by and large, these programs is Prop C money. So not, I mean, it's local taxpayer dollars, but not general fund. So just to keep that in mind. The other thing that we're trying to solve for here, and I'll say, Heather, I feel like I should speak to this since this was in particular a bee in my bonnet, is the way we are using data here is through our medical record, right? Like this is the medical record, and what you're seeing is sort of one and the same. And we had a conundrum, which is the medical record, of course, operates on people giving their names and date of birth. But we don't only want to have higher threshold. We are really trying to create lower threshold. Come on in, we'll chat with you. Or here I am in front of you on the street.
Yeah.
We don't want to create a system where we'd like to know how many people we're reaching. And if they don't want to give us their name, we still want to know how many people we're reaching. And so this is what's underneath the non-registered and registered and the best neighborhoods, where people may not be giving us their detailed information or wanting to sign up for something as formal as some sort of healthcare. And it has taken some doing to create, I think Heather said it, so, Heather's been working, her team have been working really hard, and our IT teams, to figure out how we can capture how many people we're actually interacting with in the city, even if they are not raising their hand to come into clinical care. And as Member Fields is pointing out, we are not going to be able to bill any health insurance for that money, but that is part of the point of having a more proactive, we're going to come find you and try to pull you into care kind of system.
Okay, I think. Yeah, okay, so next we have analytics and evaluation, and who is reporting on that?
We have Mark Rose, and thank you,
Okay.
Heather. I know you have another meeting.
Thanks,
Heather. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, hi, everybody. I just have one slide, so this shouldn't take too long. And just to say quickly, when I logged in, Kelly was going over the implementation plan. And I know there was some questions when I logged in about the priority population, so I'm happy to talk about that as well. And also, a couple things were mentioned in the implementation plan that I'm gonna just elaborate on a little bit. So one of them was about our challenges in staffing and in hiring. And so for the past fiscal year, it's only been myself and one healthcare analyst for this team of analytics and evaluation. So we have recently, we lost the slides, I think.
We're trying to share because it was not on the correct slide. So I think we're.
Oh, okay, I'll keep.
Keep talking.
So we recently added 2 new staff in the last couple of months, an epidemiologist 1 and an epidemiologist 2. And I've just made a recommendation for hire for a senior health program planner. So that person hopefully will start in the middle of February. And then at that point, we will just have 1 analyst position left to fill, which will be an epidemiologist 1 position. So a lot of movement is happening, a lot of time invested in, onboarding and training and getting new staff up to speed. So moving on from that, we've been investing lots of time, it's been brought up already, in the wait time data. So specifically mental health residential, substance use residential, and ICM wait times are the ones that we've been tackling first. And I won't go into all the details of all that's required in order to make sure that this data is accurate and valid. But it's very extensive. It's very complicated. And we've been doing that not only through the data side, but by ensuring that we're meeting with subject matter experts who really understand the data and know what it should look like and can weigh in on that for us. So we're just going to be finalizing those wait times very soon, and in preparation for, in that third bullet point, I referred to the Board of Supervisors meeting being in March, because at one point it was going to be in March. Now it sounds like it's going to be in February. In any case, we'll have the data ready by that meeting, and that will include the wait times for mental health residential and substance use residential, as well as some of the results from the bed optimization study. I oversee the analyst who works on that as well. And I don't know if anyone else is seeing the slides now, but I'm not seeing.
No, we're not, so we're working on getting them. We can't show them from where we used to. And so, there we go. Thank you, Jen.
I can just talk off the top of my head too. Okay, no problem. So I don't know the timing of this, but it's possible. When we thought that the Board of Supervisors meeting was going to be in March, we're going to bring that wait time data and the bed optimization data here in February. I think that's still a tentative plan. And then the next, after the mental health residential and substance use residential wait time data and bed optimization results are all finalized, then we'll work on finalizing the ICM wait time data. And we'd like to preview that with this group as well. So that's all I have, but I'm happy to answer questions. And like I said, if there were lingering questions around the priority population, I can speak to those as well.
Steve.
Yeah, I've just, a number of us in the residential treatment system still have some residual concern about this kind of data, because the last time this was done, it was so sloppy and so full of errors, it was difficult. I really I commend you on the rigor with which your team's going through this. But what I wanted to confirm, Monica, is part of this development information that's going to go to the board include feedback to the programs themselves to assure that there's not, or what's been the process of assuring that there aren't systemic things that only the treatment providers know about in the community that is not going to necessarily be discerned from a higher level analytic of just time and movement? Because that's what happened last time, and a lot of erroneous information got conveyed in that previous report. So are the providers getting a chance to look at it to make sure that the nuances involved in these things are part of your report to the board?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It makes me think of two things. So one is, actual, errors in data is one thing, but then there's also, of course, really important context about the wait time data. So I think in terms of the errors, we haven't gotten down. We've done some work with individual CBOs and providers. We could certainly be more comprehensive about that. We've been primarily focused on ensuring that the data is accurate, but in those conversations, we of course are learning about all the contextual things related, particularly to beds. Of course, one of the main things is staffing, right? Because you can't provide care in a particular bed if there's not the staff to be able to, provide that care. So we're definitely documenting all of those different issues and making sure that they're, part of the context that we provide the data in.
What's the baseline year for this data? What years are you looking at?
Well, so the bed optimization data is the calendar year 2021. The wait time data, where it's, from the time of the referral to the time that a person got admitted, we have that up to, I wouldn't call it real time, but, to the most recent, quarter or year. So and that's part of what we've been setting up is a mechanism by which we can track that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm concerned because, of course, the COVID years had an unreal impact on a whole amount of assumptions in healthcare
Right.
systems. And nothing was more effective than the delay in being able to admit people when there are clients in a program who tested the 2021 was just a disruptive year across the board. So I'll be very interested in seeing how this report acknowledges that this is the most abnormal time to try and do a bed optimization report without understanding what the city requirements were around closing down admissions while there were people in the program who were positive with COVID. So that's going to be a confounding factor. And I think that I'll be interested to see how that's incorporated in the report.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good point.
Monica, the discussion you came in on when we were going over the implementation report was Member Salinas's question about, I think, page 6 of the report. I don't have it open right now, but the population with the Venn diagrams and the question of whether the 35% number for people in the target population with both a serious mental health issue and substance use disorder, that seems like it could be an undercount. And I know you're redoing that population estimate analysis. Do you think that first run of it, that 35% was an underestimate, and that we'll see something different the next time, or do you?
I think it depends on a couple of things. I mean, I think it certainly could be an underestimate. So we're pulling in data from the behavioral health system, Avatar, and then on the medical side, Epic, as well as data from the homelessness and supportive housing department. And the reason I bring that up is because, of course, Epic and Avatar are electronic medical records, and anyone who touches those systems generally needs to have a diagnosis to get a service. On the HSH side, of course, that's not the case. And so, it is possible that one significant reason that there could be an undercount is if those folks from, HSH that we don't have a record of anyplace else, or we can't match, records with them, that we wouldn't know anything about any diagnoses that those persons might have. Now we are looking into, we'd reported on kind of a snapshot in time for that population, and now that, as I mentioned, we have more staff, we're setting up a mechanism by which we can look at what the changes have been over time, and we can look at how many people are getting, added to the priority population, how many people are falling out, and sort of just the overall numbers of persons experiencing homelessness.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Moving on. Thank you so much. Our next domain is the new beds and facilities, and who is reporting on that? You and Joan.
That come to the table.
This is stand here. So my name is Ian Chung here.
You have to get closer to the
Okay.
microphone.
People
They
like
can't
it.
hear you. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
So I'm the co-lead of the new beds and facility domains with the mental health assets. 1 second, I think
Yeah,
the slide is ready. Thank you. So this is actually the dashboard we are renewing every month.
Can that be Zoom? Can we zoom in on that at all?
If not, you have this.
I know.
It's available.
I like to look at it up. Okay.
55.
Yeah, also this dashboard
That
is
helps. That's
available
good.
on the
Yeah,
San Francisco DPH website. So as you see, we have a 12 project under our new beds and facility domain. we have completed 9 projects. And then by opening about 350 residential treatment and care beds. So we only have like 3 projects still in progress, expected to open in the next few years. So I'm gonna just give you some snapshots focusing on the 3 programs, projects we are actually developing right now. So next slide, please. Those are actually crisis stabilization unit. And then second one is a dual diagnosis program. And third one is a transitional age to youth program. So a crisis stabilization unit is a program based on the short-term, the place, and then to used as alternative to the hospital beds. And then so it's going to be up to 16 beds. And then we already purchased the building at the 822 Gary Street. So the exciting news is that we're going to break ground soon on the actually February 5th. So for this project, we applied for the state grant, which is called Behavioral Health Continuum Infrastructure Program, which is called, we call BCHIP. And then we received $6.75 million. So second one is a dual diagnosis program. So we are targeting to expand, add actually 30 more beds. So we are actually making multiple efforts. 3 efforts we're making is that the first one is we purchased the out of the county residential beds. It's 12 beds. So during the pandemic, I think one of our, not just one of, a few actually, ours residential treatment program providers are actually temporarily closed due to staffing issue. So we bought the 12 beds for overflow beds out of the county, and then including Alameda County and Marin County providers. So we're using these beds for emergency purpose at this point. So second, actually the effort we're making towards a dual diagnosis program expansion is we are right now in progress of building and opening a new program up to 16 beds. So with an existing CBO for residential treatment program. So the contract is going to be done soon, and then hopefully we can start the project and then building a new program. Third one is a third effort we're making at the same time is also we're exploring a purchase option, and then the use of in the hope of using actually grant funding, state grant funding to expand the services. So we're still looking for the locations. So those are actually the efforts we're making towards the dual diagnosis program expansion. The last one is a transitional age to youth program, so residential program. So we have completed a program description, development, and everything, but we are still looking for a location, which is very challenging. So the Department of Real Estate identified a few locations, but we visited, discussed, and nothing, everything fell through so far. So those are the 3 main actually efforts we are making for 3 projects. Next slide, please. So I just want to provide you with just a snapshot for the how much actually state grant we have received for our new beds and facility projects. So overall, new beds and facility team have received about $55.5 million, which is a huge amount of money. So those money is going to be just used for these 4 new projects. One of them is actually that we got $32 million over the next 4 years from the behavioral health bridge housing. So second one is we have received the $6.75 million for crisis stabilization unit from the BCHIP, behavioral health continuum infrastructure program from DHCS. The next one is we have received $9.5 million for the new opening the new step down program on the Treasure Island, which is going to be, I think, about 240 step down unit beds. So from the community care expansion grant from the Department of Social Services. The last one is we have awarded $6.5 million for community care expansion preservation program for assisted living, AKA the boarding care facilities. So those are our state grant updates. There are a lot of work, administrative work involved for the state grant funding. So, but it's going well. That's all. I was asked to shorten my presentation.
Great.
Thank you.
Just
Any
one quick
questions?
question for me, the bridge funding, is that related to Care Court? Am I correct?
Yes,
That's what
it
came out
is
of it. Okay.
related. So Behavioral Health Bridge Housing is a shortened, we call BHBH or BB. So this is a state grant to provide transitional housing and shelter beds to meet the to address immediate housing. And then they only provide actually funding for transitional housing, shelter beds, not permanent. So that is a kind of one of the things I want to address. So this is not part of a Care Court, but the BHBH actually statement clearly indicates priority for housing for BHBH should be Care Court clients.
Thank you. That's what. Yes.
I just want to ask, because I can swear I recall that Dr. Paving said that there was going to be a new dual diagnosis program specifically for women. It was, he said, didn't he say that like a couple of meetings ago?
It was in last year's budget.
Yeah,
Is that-
that is actually was not originally part of our new business facility efforts. And then probation, Department of Probation Office, they actually asked us if we can provide some funding or having actually collaborative project for the women who have a behavioral health issue plus history of justice involved, history. So we're still, I think, having a discussion, still a little bit up in the air. So I think that is actually, I think they're still looking for a location. So we discussed, but I think it's still up in the air. So I think that project is right now pending on our end.
It was announced a lot, during the budget season under the mayor's plan. So that's interesting to hear. Okay, anything else on this?
One quick question is it is still the intent of the department, if I understand it right, by the way, congratulations on all the work done on the CSU, the big task of getting a site, but is that program going to go out to RFP when the department's ready to implement it?
Question. It could be or it could be not, because as Hillary mentioned, we are waiting for the new ordinance passing actually. So the new ordinance, I think it was heard in January, to waive the competitive solicitation process when we are purchasing new beds, residential beds. So it was heard at the Board of.
It was only introduced.
Yes, not heard. Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe it's gonna be heard in March. That's what I heard. So hopefully it can pass and then we can actually just bypass, but it's not, if that ordinance passed, we don't need to get through RFP. But if not, we should get through the RFP for the CSU, yes.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you so much. Dr. Hom, it's nice to see you in person. I've seen you on the TV. But,
I'm sure he appreciates that.
is that right? I'm confused about time because we have an hour to go, right?
We do, but we had allotted an hour for this with our domain leads on the agenda, so we're just a bit over time with that. I just want to make sure that we.
Okay.
Dr. Rahman is.
wanted to make sure I was- Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here. And go ahead and show us what's up.
Thank you for the opportunity. Certainly, and you can go to the next slide. I mean, certainly, as you all know, overdoses remain such a public health crisis here. In San Francisco, where we lost 806 individuals by a preliminary count from our Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in 2020. That's a 25% increase from just the year before. And so a lot of work is going into certainly this work, a lot of efforts are going into this and to what can we do to reduce the morbidity and mortality from substances. I won't go into all of that sort of for this specific presentation, but I'm happy to share more about it at a later time. But the next slide here, I do want to sort of share a little bit about some of the data that we are now looking at, and we have really sort of committed to both really reviewing, making more available to the public, to stakeholders, to really make sure that we are informing our efforts by the best data that we have, the most timely data that we have in the city to really drive our interventions, scale up what is working, and then also sort of pivot away from things that may not be working. And so as you can sort of see from these graphs here, these are from our publicly available dashboard that we released in September of last year. This is available, and these are updated on a regular basis. I say regular in that all of these sort of measures that you'll see on the next couple of slides here, they vary a little bit by when we get those data. So as soon as we do get the data, we are updating this website. In some cases, these are weekly. In the case of 911 related drug-related calls, sometimes it's monthly in terms of the monthly fatalities that we get from the medical examiners. And so it varies a little bit, but these are the trends that we are making available and increasingly doing sort of more additional analyses on these to really make sure that we are tailoring our interventions as best we can, as appropriately as we can to the different populations that we do see in San Francisco. So on the left here these are sort of the monthly data from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner showing sort of the month-to-month variation in our overdose deaths. 80% of our overdose deaths, as you all know, do involve fentanyl. It's a very strong synthetic opioid that is really driving our overdose deaths both locally and nationally. And that is sort of what we're seeing in this overall trend that is going up on the left-hand graph. On the right are sort of the most frequent data that we are able to get. These are from our colleagues in the fire department, looking at our overdose-related 911 calls. And so you see those are ebb and flow depending on this weekly variation or seasonal variation that we do know exists within our 911 calls. But we're also really hoping to utilize these timely data to inform our work, especially if we see a significant increase, significant spike. What might that indicate? How can we respond quickly and appropriately? Next slide.
Quick question. On the previous slide.
Sure.
Jen, can you go back one, please? Thanks.
All right. So the overdose related 911 calls are not necessary. Are there cases that overlap with drug overdose deaths, or are these completely separate? These are overdose related calls where the overdose is in fact alleviated.
Yes, good question. I think if I'm understanding it, if the overdose was reversed and was transported to the hospital, for example, those are all captured on the right-hand side there. If EMS showed up and the person was already deceased, it will not show up on that right-hand side. It'll be on the left.
Is there any follow-up on either both columns where you actually look at the individuals who either died or who had their overdose reversed as to prior encounters within the mental health system? San Francisco mental health system.
Yes, we are just undertaking that analysis.
Okay.
To understand what are those touch points in the months or year preceding a fatal overdose, or ideally also a non-fatal overdose.
Okay. That's something for the future to talk about.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, okay.
The next slides now, the next two sort of graphs here show our substance use services. So these are showing receipt of treatment, different levels of treatment that we do have within the city here. Yeah. The left being sort of methadone. Currently what we are showing there are our annual data. I think in the future, we're aiming to have this be updated more regularly, likely quarterly, to really understand trends in receipt of methadone, recognizing that it is one of the 3 FDA-approved medications for treating opioid use disorder that has been shown to really have a mortality benefit. And so you can sort of see that trend has sort of been level for the last couple of years here, where we've sort of been thinking about. And on the next slide, when I sort of talk about our plans for 2024.
If I have a question about this, sorry to interrupt, but is this data just through Q3? So we would expect that pink line for 2023 is going to be considerably higher, and the methadone clients by year is actually going up? Is it all through Q3, like on the right-hand side, or?
So Dr. Hammer, are you talking about the right-hand graph or the left hand?
Well, I'm asking if we're only getting data up to Q3 for both the different data points. So is the 2023 partial number really only 3/4 of the year, and so we would expect it to go up?
That one's through January through November.
Okay.
We are.
So it's 11, 12.
It's 11.
Yeah, 11, 12. Okay, sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, sorry, this is helpful.
Time period equal.
Yeah, much.
Yeah.
It's there.
Okay.
But thank you for clarifying that. I think it's something that we can also think about how do we
Oh, I see. It says January to November. Okay.
yeah, some mixed measures. And I think this is the challenge that I think we have is that the time unit that we're using varies, but we also want to, have the most up-to-date numbers that we do have. So unfortunately, it varies a little bit. And we try to do our best, if you scroll down, I mean, it won't be on this slide, but on the website itself, we have a call-out box that talks about the data source and more of an explanation for it for anyone who might be interested. Happy to answer any questions at a later time. And on the right are our emissions for residential treatment that we sort of do see are sort of decline in 2022. We do see a significant uptick so far in 2023. We'll see what Q4 ultimately shows there, but these are things that we are tracking and trending to best characterize not only individuals who are dying of an overdose from a non-fatal overdose, but now who are also receiving treatment in the city.
So, so those represent individuals. So like there were 224 people admitted in that last quarter
Those represent the number of admissions.
of actual admissions, right?
We
Okay.
actually are reporting unique residential admissions in the treatment on demand.
Okay, good. And then, what kind of treatment does this apply to?
This is
Residential, I see, okay.
This is
residential.
specifically residential. On the website, there's also withdrawal management specifically is on there,
Okay.
methadone and buprenorphine.
And, medical assisted treatment, anything that we used to call detox? Any of those kinds of?
The withdrawal management
Withdrawal
is
management.
sort of how
Okay.
it's captured on this. And then we break it down. What has been known as sort of MAT, medications for addiction treatment. We split by methadone and buprenorphine.
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
Next slide. And then really just sort of, and then again, I want to sort of keep this brief, but I'm happy to share more about this later time. Here's sort of what we've really articulated as a department and as a city of really prioritizing going into this calendar year here. This is building upon our overdose prevention plan that came out at the end of 2022. And it's really built based on what do we see as happening? And B, what are the evidence-based measures that we have that we can scale up to save lives in San Francisco? On the left here is really increasing the availability, accessibility, and effectiveness of this continuum of services. We're really sort of investing in more in contingency management, methadone and buprenorphine. These are two medications that have been shown to reduce mortality by 50%. I'll say as a primary care doctor, there is no other medication that I can prescribe in medicine that has that degree of mortality benefit. So we want to at least make sure that individuals are being offered that, right? And then, thinking about how can we make more services available with our pharmacy services? In 2023, they began delivering medications and other services to individuals living in supportive housing. How can we scale that up in this calendar year? And on the right is thinking about our community engagement side of things. How do we think about really doing more education, more support for individuals who are in the community to reduce some of the stigma that surrounds this, to support individuals who may be contemplating engaging in different services. And so that includes thinking about individuals who are in higher risk settings, such as supportive housing, our SROs. Really thinking about the disparities in overdoses that we do see among Black African Americans typically. Black African Americans represent 6% of our population in San Francisco, yet about 30% are overdose decedents. And then we start thinking about post-overdose, recognizing that is such an important time for engaging individuals in services, in care. How can we make sure that our teams that are out there engaging individuals post-overdose are equipped with all the different resources that they have to help individuals immediately following an overdose? So I'll stop there and happy to answer any immediate questions here, but then also happy to take any questions that Valerie may hear or others.
I have a few questions. So one question is, we are due to get some funding to address some of these issues from the overdose settlement, the opioid settlement, I'm sorry. And I'm curious what's happening with that, what funds we might expect, what the plan is for where they're going to be directed, timeline, all of that. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So that's a great point. And so there's a lot of funding that is coming into both San Francisco and other counties in California through the opioid settlements that we as a city negotiated with pharmaceutical companies and distributors. And it is the amount is large. You know, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. I will also say at the same breath, this is the one sort of part that doesn't necessarily always make it into the newspapers, that it's the way that these were also negotiated was over the span of up to about 20 years. So when you actually break it down by year, it actually isn't quite, it's welcome dollars, but it isn't, I would argue, commensurate to really meet this need.
Yeah.
So how do we sort of think about being as strategic and as thoughtful about these? Right now, sort of what has happened with those dollars is that proposals have been sort of put together based on sort of the gaps that we sort of do know in the system. Where do we see that we could potentially invest more in? And that has sort of been sent to the mayor's budget office for their review.
So those proposals came from DPH?
It came from
You said they're being
DPH
put
as well
together.
as, so some came from DPH in partnership with getting sort of input from providers, from individuals who are in sort of the health systems here, who all sort of informed how can these dollars best be spent. And then so I'm hoping that with sort of approval of like, yes, these are how these dollars could and should be spent.
Then those are sent to the mayor is what, I'm sorry,
Yes.
because I interrupted you. Okay, and then what's the process from there? The mayor says, that she has to do it through the city budget process?
Yes.
Yes.
It goes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So
So
she
through
will
the
have to
normal budgetary-
okay, this budget
cycle. Yeah.
will have to indicate the spending plan basically, and then that the origin or the funding for that would come from, okay.
Exactly.
And then my other question is just, well, to be frank, what is happening with the overdose prevention plan that you referred to, and it was maybe a year ago, you said, I see that, you're trying to implement some of this through this, but a lot of it has clearly not yet been implemented. And I'm just wondering, again, the timeline, the funding, what is the status overall? Because it was a good plan in my opinion, and needs to be implemented immediately because of what you just presented on.
Yeah, thank you for that the last sentence there.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, any loss of life with this is just is heartbreaking.
Yes.
But then to also see this year-over-year increase that we've now seen for the past 3 and a 25% increase. I mean, in public health, I mean, you all know this, and I'm sorry to be preaching to a choir here. We don't see this degree of fluctuations with other public health crises. I don't think that we as a country are really taking this. I feel like we are not putting forth the resources that are truly needed to meet this. We as sort of mentioned there, so you pointed out, like we released this plan that I think is really based on the best available evidence that we had back in 2022, and still remains, I think, a lot of the evidence in support of what could we do as a city. I would say we have struggled to implement some of these things to the level that we want to. I will specifically call out wellness hubs.
Yeah.
What we sort of envisioned as being sites where people could use reobtain drugs under supervision, safe consumption, so that if an overdose occurs, it would be something that could be attended to. We've ran into a number of hurdles that you have heard about, others have heard about, in terms of our ability to open one or more of these in San Francisco. That was a lot of the cornerstone of that plan. So we sort of thought through, okay, there is so much more that we still could do. In the absence of a wellness hub, what else that we could still invest in? Some of these are reflected here. I will say that we have met some of the goals that were in the plan. Our ability to increase the naloxone. We distributed more than 120 doses of that, 120,000 doses of that in 2023, which is over 100% increase from the previous 12 months. And we still have these overdose deaths.
Yeah,
right. So how do we still keep doing more? So we have achieved some of the interim measures, but absolutely, we are not, bending this curve in the direction that we want. And so we are still continuing to sort of put forth and measure ourselves against what we have done within the plan. And also are sort of, looking this again of like, what hasn't worked and why? How do we think about then pivoting towards the things that we know have a lot of evidence in terms, and how can we be more creative with those in terms of like expansion of methadone, expansion of contingency management as ways of engaging individuals into services? I'm sorry, that's not a
No.
satisfying answer there. but-
I think you got at what I'm getting at. And I would like to suggest that this body request, a deeper dive presentation on both of those things, on the overdose settlement funds, opioid settlement fund, sorry, and the overdose prevention plan, because there are obviously other sort of forces at work and other folks involved in both of those processes that we could and should hear from. It's really important that we get that money out, and that essentially, as I see it, it could be as straightforward as it could support the funding for the things that were in that overdose prevention plan. And then, as I said earlier, implementing that plan, with to the full degree. I personally feel like it's unconscionable that we haven't been very, very aggressive in ensuring the implementation right from the get-go. And meanwhile, we see the results. People have died and continue to die while we're sort of, trying to figure it out or whatever exactly is going on. So I would like to request, presentations on both those things for this body.
Sarah, I would just add that
Yeah.
we ought to be, and I assume this is something you guys do all the time, is to see what are the best practices in other counties or in other states, other communities around the country. And is there something we're missing? Or we doing what is pretty much standard, but still not successful? You don't have to ask that necessarily. I just think as part of a look, we ought to be thinking about that.
If I can respond just one
Yes.
aspect about that. I appreciate that point. I'll say that absolutely. I feel like we are fortunate to have colleagues across the country talking about this on a regular basis.
I bet. Yeah.
But I mean, and constantly learning.
Yeah.
I think there are things that we could be doing, new, different, and better.
Yeah.
We are working on those things. I'll also say that at the same time that as a country, more than 100,000 people are dying of overdoses each year. And our drug czar, Dr. Rahul Gupta, has projected a 50% increase between now and 2025. So I would also say that I would say that no jurisdiction has truly figured this out.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, and I say this in all the presentations that I give, we also welcome ideas. It is going to take some innovation. It is going to take some creativity. We're thinking about how do we employ the resources that we do have in the most effective manner. And I don't think we've figured it out. So I will say, as much as we are investing in evidence-based services, it is also going to require some creativity, some fundamental changes in the way that we approach this to really sort of change the trajectory that the country is on. And so I do say this by welcoming
Great.
ideas and discussion about this right now. Great.
Okay, anything else for Dr. Hom?
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the Sublocade has really worked well for a lot of our clients, and it would be great. I don't know, maybe we can look at beyond, the OBIT clinic for administration of Sublocade. Like I'm sure we could probably start doing it at Citywide, and that because the long acting is much, it's a long acting buprenorphine, and that's because people aren't going to remember to take their buprenorphine necessarily every day, and that's been super helpful for our clients.
Thank you for sharing.
And I see-
About how we'd right now. Is it only? I don't know. That's where our
Using it at,
It's not, but it's still pretty infrequent.
okay.
I would love to.
scan where folks can start getting the
I think we're-
Sublocade.
And I do see Steve's hand up.
I think we're giving it Maria.
Field.
Oh,
I just wanted to add, it's a great report. I appreciate it, Doctor. I just feel I need to say that as long as safe injection centers aren't part of the strategy that we're doing, which I'm sure there's data on the direct impact of that opportunity, that service on deaths in the community, that we are working with a hand, but tied behind our back looking at other interventions, which we need to maximize. But the elephant in the room is if we're talking about deaths while we're trying to reduce reliance on drugs, address addiction in creative ways, without that option around the outcome of not having that tool. I'd love to see that data on the impact or even the projection that we could have on reducing these deaths significantly if we could get out of the 19th century and reach a place politically where San Francisco takes the risk and the moral step of challenging the resistance to safe rejection centers so that we can bring that as a part of our intervention strategy. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I would say if Valerie, maybe you can send out the overdose prevention plan, because I'm not sure if everybody has seen that, and at least people can take a
That would
look
be helpful.
on paper.
Maybe we can start giving gift cards for Sublocade injections. If there was, I know that's a whole huge other fight.
Out of the.
But we could just start.
No, out of,
Get
no,
your
but that's a
Sublocade,
perfect type
get a
of
Subway
expense.
gift card.
It's a perfect type of expense from that those opioid settlement funds, right? For example. So,
Does anybody do that? Incentives for engaging in long-acting medication treatment?
I don't know.
sort of
I mean,
contingency
it-
management
it's-
in a way.
it's- Yeah, it's
right?
a model.
Point out,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
I've heard of it being used for other sort of long-acting medications, long-acting injectables. I've just not heard necessarily applied to Sublocade or Brixadi. But I think it's worth.
Yeah.
I think incentives go a long way.
They sure do.
Okay, so we have to plan for our, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Very helpful.
Appreciate it. We have to plan for our next meeting now, right? That's,
First, we need to do public comment.
yeah. Always, I'm sorry.
Yes, so members of the public who wish to provide comments on this agenda item, which was discussion item 4, director's update and update from lots of other folks as well. You're invited to participate in a number of ways. There are no members of the public here in person. So if you are participating online and would like to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand. And we will call on you and you will have 2 minutes to provide comments. If you'd like to do that, please raise your hand now. I do not see any virtual hands raised. So would recommend that we close public comments.
Okay. Closing public comment, and now we'll move on to the meeting planning.
And so if you're following along at home, we already did the voting for the chair and the vice chair, so we're skipping.
And we also thank Sarah too.
We also thank Sarah. So we're skipping
Do that
to
again.
slide 71.
That's the next slide. One that follows.
So, boy, this is the first time I used my voice just about in the entire meeting. So we have our next meeting on February 27th. It'll be same room, same place. And the things that we're considering for the February meeting are more of this follow-up on the Office of Coordinated Care. We've been talking about how central that is for so many things. And so we're going to follow up on that and continue to learn. Staffing and wages, the study that has been done by the Controller's Office is going to be coming back to this group, and they will be presenting. And then talking a little bit and hearing from the residential care hearing, which is about wait times and bed optimization. So that's what those are the considerations that we were bringing forward to you. But as we've been practicing together, are these the right ones that we want to discuss in February? Or is there anything in addition that you would like to add? From our
No,
side, if you could hold, just, sorry,
Go ahead.
Sarah, hold on to
No,
for a
it's fine.
moment. Because I did want to just notice there's all these future things that we're kind of tracking. So there's this analytics and evaluation, there's HSH, Behavioral Health Commission, community engagement findings, all that's coming up. And maybe you want to bump some of these forward, but just wanted to create that space for you when you're looking at this. Sorry, please go ahead.
Well, and
Vice
I'd like to-
Chair Short.
I'd like to point out that there's really like now 2 other items for that consideration for future meetings that we just talked about. And also ask Valerie if, when is this treatment on demand report, due out? Maybe
February
that's something
1st.
we want to, so I would put, so there's 3 more, items we might want to have present to us.
What are the, what's?
Okay, I'll run them down. So it's the overdose
overdose,
prevention
yeah.
plan and the status, then the opioid settlement
That's it,
funds,
yeah.
and then the treatment on demand report. So, do we have a sense that, it seems to me, looking at these first 3 that are in consideration, that will not take all of our time, correct?
I think all 3 of those are actually too much.
You think it will overtake, oh, wow, okay.
So for example, I think OCC follow-up, I would guess that will need 45 minutes at
Oh,
least, probably.
okay.
Staffing and wages, they are able to finally come next month. And it may be helpful to have them come in their process and get feedback before they then have to meet other deadlines with that project to like publish results.
Mhm.
I think they need at least 30 minutes. Hearings typically is about like 30 minutes of content, including like questions.
Mhm.
So I think typically we can only kind of include one blockbuster item per
Mhm.
meeting, or we can potentially do like the hearing and staffing and wages. OCC, it tends to result in a lot of questions, I
Yeah.
think. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we've been trying to balance too, is having things that you all want to hear about and then also having enough time to have a good discussion. So even today, we didn't necessarily get to play out the entire discussion with everything. And so it's kind of
Valerie
balance.
spent an hour and a half today on the director's report, including all the sub reports, and I realized that the opioid was the overdose report was a little bit different from the rest of the reports in terms of domains. But is it intended that going forward, we're going to need 45 minutes to an hour for monthly for the director's report?
So I think this is a little bit of a back and forth with the group is right. Like we talked about piloting this strategy. I think this was the first time that I did not sort of pull the updates myself from the team and ask them to come instead. I think we got too much content. And to be honest, so it took a little too long for what we had in mind. So we could, depending on the other presentations, we can do things like have Dr. Cummins and I present a couple of updates from each domain on their behalf. But if you guys really liked having the whole team come, it does seem like 1, they need to shorten content a bit, but 2, it's more like a 90-minute.
It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time, and it crowds out everything else. I mean, I agree. I think it's essential that we have Dr. Cummins come monthly if she can. But I don't necessarily think we have to have the full reports just because it crowds out a lot of
Maybe
others.
it's like one of those folks plus Dr. Cummins each month and that rotates or something.
Well, I think that's important feedback. I mean, I think the request, as I understood it from the meeting optimization group, was to do sort of like more frequent light updates from all of the domains. And so I think there's different ways to get at that.
I think it may be that for part of the treatment, I want to call it treatment planning, I'm sorry, meeting planning, that perhaps we as a group ought to talk about which of the domain reports we think have priority, and that we maybe add one domain or 2 at our request to go with the director's report, as opposed to
So round robin.
having everybody come in or whatever. I mean, we gotta, if we're going to be more strategic in our thinking about what we want to do, is to tie the reports to the things that we think are the most important.
And I want to know that because of the number of members present here too, we can't take too much action, but we can discuss.
You're out next time. You're off next time.
This is my last meeting. This is my last meeting.
Okay, so we have.
But we've brought people back before when they try to leave. I've succeeded in that, so, you know.
Who's somebody be chair?
Exactly. So what are people thinking about?
Contract without being paid?
Oh, sure.
An unpaid contract.
What are people thinking about this next meeting? Swapping something out for one of these categories versus maybe doing the two, more timely staffing and wages in residential care. And then adding something else in there or what, or keeping it as is. Any opinions, strong opinions on this?
I mean, we've been waiting for the staffing and wages for a long time, and then this is the month that they can come, and then they might not be able to come again for months if like we have to leave. And that, like, if that's the, like, that seems like that's gonna be a large chunk of time, so there's not so much wiggle room for really trying to put something else that's big on the agenda, so.
I think that and the residential care hearing is very timely. We don't want to, it's not really something we can put on either. So I think we should definitely keep those two. And the question is, the 45 minutes on office coordinated care, would it be better spent on something else?
I think there's no time urgency for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Necessarily, other than just perhaps continue when knowledge of SCRT is a little more fresh.
Okay. So I suggest, that since that treatment on demand report's going to be fresh, the press is right about then maybe that's what we bring in at that moment.
I mean, that could be
what
Dr.
others-
Cunning's director's update.
It could be part of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Should it be part of the update or should it be separate?
It can,
Let's do it part of the update then. And then does that give us room for another item then, or?
No.
I think,
No, it doesn't.
Because that just
That
expands your update.
That just expands
Yeah.
our update
Okay,
and.
okay, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that just, and maybe we don't need, the facilities, I mean, because I don't think there's gonna be any change. Right,
Right.
so we don't have to, we can cut that part out.
That's probably right, yeah.
And new beds and facilities.
And I don't think we need the evaluation,
Oh, you're talking about for the round robin
yeah,
piece?
so A and D
next
would
time
be-
either.
Yeah, so analytics and evaluation is folded into the residential care hearing because that
Oh, okay.
includes bed optimization and wait time stay.
Okay, good. Then
My suggestion would be to defer off.
Yeah, no, I think we've decided that, yeah, to do that. We psychically did that.
And it sounds like for the round robin, a shorter version, maybe with not all of the.
So that-
domains, is that what?
Yeah, so that Dr. Cunnings can spend a little more time on the treatment on demand report. And then we would cut out the beds and facilities and the data and analytics there. Yeah,
So maybe a couple bullet points on OCC, just latest.
sure. If there's anything to report, yep. Not just for the sake of it, but yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's helpful.
And I think for future meetings, we need to put the overdose plan back on the agenda.
Yes.
For a future.
Right, so that goes to consideration for future meetings.
Yeah, that's what I
That'll
was,
be
that's what I was
two
saying.
topics
Yeah.
left for that
And we'll send around the actual report before.
one. Great, yes.
One other thing that you could do is ask the domain leads that have dashboards, like Heather showed us some and Jeff, like to put the links to their data clearly in the meeting materials that get sent out, and then see how it would work for some domains, like maybe those two, to for the committee members just to ask questions about the data on the dashboard, because the dashboard should reflect what the new stuff is, right? I mean, what's happened since last month.
Yeah, I know it's very hard to pull this stuff together. And so, yeah, I understand, I understand it's sort of out of your hands sometimes too. But getting the package, whether this time it was what, 60 something, 80 something slides at 4:30 in the afternoon prior to the meeting, plus the draft implementation report is a little overwhelming.
Sure, I appreciate it.
And I don't know, it may be if there are certain pieces, particularly reports or whatever, that can be sent out earlier. I mean, I hate to get stuff piecemeal, but sometimes if it's something that's substantive, it would be a lot better to get something, or, a week in advance.
I appreciate that.
and then you just integrate it into the presentation, into the slides.
It is a continual goal that we have not yet been able to meet, and I appreciate.
No, I understand that.
You
You know, but I-
implementation
yeah.
report though too, because the idea was not necessarily that you had to read it last night. You do have until Friday.
Yeah.
So just a reminder. that
No,
you
I
have until
understand
Friday.
that, but it's,
Yeah, yeah, no,
it's
your
helpful
point
to
is
do it
taken,
in a
yeah.
group as a,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't
Yeah.
necessarily, we want to have 7 or 8 different comments going out independent of the group. I mean, it's better to group. But for example, if there's a treatment on demand report or some other report, having that a little time in advance just to
My
read
intention,
it
yeah,
and
I-
digest it.
I'm hoping to send that to you guys after it's been submitted to the Board of Mayors,
Okay.
like on the first if
All right.
possible.
It's just a comment. It's,
No, I agree, and it's a very reasonable comment.
I'll have to stop having company the night before the meeting.
I think also just for future, whenever we do have this HSH on the agenda, that might be a whole entire meeting.
Right.
I mean, and thinking
Yeah.
about like,
You know, if that's the case, I'll just throw it out. And it's hard to suggest using subcommittees, I know, or ad hoc committees, just given time for people. Is that something that needs to be teed up? Where it might be helpful to have a small working group?
It might, in terms of refining specific questions or area, topic areas.
You guys know this better than
I
I
could
do,
see
but
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think they would be interested. Yeah, it's sort of a tailored request.
Right.
About.
We could do that. Yeah.
It's like.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
So like between the February, March meeting, maybe a
Yeah.
working discussion group for the HSH.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I mean, I don't know if there's any milestones with their strategic planning or anything. I'm not as close to the timeline, but I mean, their portfolio is very broad and it would probably be useful.
Yeah.
Have some
And I think we know what we want to focus on. Okay, great.
Or
So
public comment.
that's yeah. Intersteping, so I don't forget. Okay, let's do public comment.
And this will be 2 rounds.
Right,
of
right.
public comment immediately.
Closing. Wow.
One is public comment for this particular discussion item, which was meeting planning.
Mhm.
So if anybody from the public would like to comment on that, please raise your virtual hand because there are no members of the public here in person. I'm refreshing the attendees. I do not see any members of the public who have their hand raised. So then we will go on to the other next public comment. So this is my favorite public comment title. Public comment for other matters within the jurisdiction of the committee that are not on the agenda. So if anybody from the public would like to comment on that, you may also raise your virtual hand. What? Refresh one more time. That was a follow-up. And I do not see any hands raised. So I think we can close both of those virtual comments here. And go to slide 75.
Yeah. So this is the usual, I mean, there's no request from city bodies or groups. Did we decide on a discussion group? Is that?
For February, between February and March.
Okay, not this period. So that stands. Okay, and of course, like the meeting minute procedures are there. Please do everyone refer back to those reports and resources because that's where some of the dashboards live, like the treatment beds that you saw today. That's where that dashboard lives. So it is a good resource for you all. And here's a list of everybody else's meetings. So if you need to attend any of these meetings, our city, our home, behavioral health commission or health commission, these are always in our slide deck so that you know when they're happening and if you want to attend. And that I believe is it.
We would need a motion to adjourn in a second.
I can make the motion, right?
I think we do. I'll second it, yeah.
I'll second it.
Okay.
So we're gonna be
Thanks, everyone.
really tight with quorum for next month. And there's no end in
And
sight for when
That's
those
why we ask for
vacancies.
RSVPs when we send out the stuff, just so we know ahead of time. So when you get those, that's why we're asking you to respond.
And I think just to make sure that because you will receive outreach from Supervisor Browning's office directly in the coming weeks to discuss membership forum in this body. So
Okay, is that, we were just trying to figure out when we'll get the information that I requested around who's applied and what seats are open and all
so that's,
that?
yeah, so that's all.
That'll be part of that discussion?
No, that's
Oh.
information I can provide, but
And so will you
So-
just,
Cut the
we
recording.
can't talk about this is what you're saying?